الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: الإيمان يماني والحكمة يماني.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Again, it actually does feel funny, me hosting Brother Yemeni's show. It does feel strange, to be honest, but this is like, mashallah, part 4. And truly, this will be an epic show, inshallah ta'ala, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This will be a fantastic discussion between Paperboy and Brother Yemeni. Let me just rewind back a bit regarding some of the arguments that Paperboy brought. And of course, the topic is your prophet is deceived. And this is the argumentation that Paperboy brought to Brother Yemeni. Some of the topics that some of the topics and the argumentations that Paperboy brought, that's a tongue twister, was claim 1, only a true prophet knows the future. Claim 2 also was Waraka, did he know who actually was in the cave to see the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Was it Jibreel? Also, those led astray go mad, and some other claims. Can Satan oppose himself? And Paperboy brought many argumentations. He brought particular scholars and names from James Bellamy, Gabriel Reynolds, even mentioned Yasser Qadi, and of course Dawaman. May Allah have mercy upon all of them. I don't know if they're alive or dead, but may Allah have mercy upon all of them and guide them to the straight path. I mean, but nevertheless, also finally, which I found very interesting, the terminologies of Yasin or Noon or Taha. Paperboy brought the arguments that these particular letters are unknown. So he came from that aspect that the Quran has certain letters which are unknown to and haven't been explained by the Prophet ﷺ to the companions, of course, down through to us. But yeah, like I said, guys, there's so many people in the chat. We want to remind the audience that we got to keep this respectful. And last show was really good, and I really appreciate everybody's interaction. And towards the end, there will be a Q&A, so stay tuned for that. So I'm going to pass the mic on to Brother Yemeni. Brother Yemeni, you want to make some opening statements? Feel free to do so.
Yeah. First and foremost, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone who's watching. I'm Paperboy. Hello to you. It's good to have you back, and it's good that we can continue this discussion and hopefully even conclude it this time. You never know. Well, to be honest, Brother Muhammad, you've covered it. You know,
I can hear some feedback. I can hear some feedback from like an echo or like a humming noise.
Yeah, there is something.
It's gone now.
Okay. Yeah, it's from Paperboy. Okay, no problem. So yeah, I mean, you've summed it up pretty quick, pretty nicely actually, because you've brought up Paperboy's main talking points from a few of the episodes. And inshallah, if anyone has missed it, you can always go back and look over it. Remember, this is a response to my presentation that I did on Hamza's Den regarding was Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam deceived, and Paperboy has come forward with his research to demonstrate that he was. Of course, I am of the opinion, based on the evidence, that he has not been able to do that. But this is where we're going to conclude, well, hopefully conclude our discussion. I do want to make one correction of a mistake I made in episode 2, and I didn't realize this mistake until I responded to someone in my comment section. It was brought up a lot that Yemeni made a mistake in saying that Waraqah made a mistake, saying that Jibreel alayhi salam only came down to prophets. Now, to explain my thought process is I did the mistake of projecting what I know now back to what people knew in the 7th century before the revelation of the Qur'an. Now, Waraqah bin Nawfal was going based on his knowledge of the Bible, right, or the Christian tradition. And I had a quick look, and the Christian tradition doesn't show or display that Gabriel actually came down to anyone other than a prophet or concerning a prophet. So with that respect, Waraqah was actually correct in his statement. Now, why my mistake is that because in the Islamic tradition, Jibril or Jibra'il, alayhi salam, he actually descends when there are gatherings and on Laylatul Qadr and so on and so forth. This is told to us in the Quran. So what I've done, the mistake that I did was taken what is mentioned in the Quran and then project it onto Waraqah bin Nawfal. And Waraqah bin Nawfal did not yet have knowledge of what was revealed in the Quran because those verses were not yet revealed. So his statement was actually accurate. Now, if Paperboy thinks of a situation that he knows within the Christian tradition that Gabriel descended for anyone other than a prophet or concerning a prophet, then let him bring that forward. But that's my correction. That's the correction I wanted to make, inshallah. Paperboy, I'll hand it over to you, mate.
Yeah, before I start, do you mind just bringing up the presentation? Yeah, I'm a bit confused about your statement, just because his statement that Jibril only appeared to prophets, where you seem to be confirming that he did appear to people other than prophets. So if that is your opinion, we're in agreement, because my statement was that Jibril appeared to, for example, Mary, and she wasn't a prophet. So I was a bit, confused about your statement.
No, so the thing is, it's concerning a prophet, right? That's why I made the clarification. When he revealed himself to Mary, it was concerning Jesus, right? So he did not descend to Mary prior to her being pregnant or her being conceiving Jesus, right? So he didn't appear to her like in her childhood or anything like that. All right, so he came about when she was going to conceive Jesus, and then he was there throughout her pregnancy, and so he was concerning a prophet. Even though she herself was not a prophet, it was concerning a prophet. So when Waraqah bin Nawfal is saying that he doesn't come for anyone but a prophet, that is part of that, because he came down for a prophet, but because he wasn't yet born, it was through his mother, right?
Well, I think that's. I mean, we can maybe later on revisit his statement, but I think his statement was quite clear. But let me just do my introduction as well. So essentially, just so people who haven't watched any of the previous one, Al-Yemeni did a presentation on Was Muhammad Deceived? So obviously I've done a response. So I just want people to understand what my line of approach is. So essentially, well, if someone is deceived, how would we decipher, or what is the methodology we would use to know whether this person was deceived? So if you say, well, how do we know the statements in the Quran are from Allah? And the response is because Allah revealed it. And then the counter response is, well, how do we know Allah revealed it? And the response is because Muhammad told us so. So if I'm coming with the question, well, how do we know Muhammad wasn't deceived by a jinn? And the response is, well, it says it was revealed by Allah in the Quran. It's a form of circular reasoning. So I'm trying to look at facts versus beliefs. So from the Christian perspective, the prior knowledge before the revelation of the Quran was that Satan himself could masquerade as an angel of light. So we have to take a holistic approach in terms of how do we assess whether the person was deceived. Because if Muhammad was deceived, then the revelation within the Quran would be a result of deception. If Angel Jibril was the one who revealed the Quran to Muhammad, then everything in the Quran would be of truth. So I'm taking an approach of using an internal critique and an external critique. I know Al-Yemeni's mentioned that the Quran does internalize some of the external critiques, but this would in itself still be an internal critique because it's using Islamic text. So in terms of if we're looking at an internal critique, some of the questions are, what is the internal evidence to show that Muhammad was deceived? So is there any information that indicates that he might have been deceived? Any sort of revelations that were revealed by Allah that if it seems to be contradicted, that might be a sense of Allah going against himself. So that was a form of deception where Allah promised something and it didn't come to fruition. So maybe that's evidence in itself of a jinn sort of deceiving Muhammad about some of the assurances he would get. And also some of the evidence of previous prophets had they experienced certain things. So that's what I'll use as an internal critique. And for an external critique, you can see a summary of what it is here, where you're using an outside belief or systems to utilize a set of principles outside of that Islamic text. So these will be questions such as, what is the external evidence to show Muhammad was deceived? So this is a sort of comparative analysis. What are some of the, if Muhammad was deceived, then some of the internal evidence would need to be consistent with some of the external evidence for validation. So it's then looking at, in totality, both evidences to come to the conclusion whether Muhammad was deceived. So last slide. So essentially, if you look at this, so because Muhammad had a single revelation, that's where we would use an internal critique. But then, so if someone said, well, how do I know Paul wasn't deceived? Well, we've got, over 40 different witnesses, for example, who had over 66 books. So we would then compare that to see, was Paul's message in line with the previous prophets? So that's sort of the external evidence. So that's the approach I was taking in terms of using the external critique for whether there was a consistency with previous messages to see where there was if there was deception or not. So hopefully people will understand my approach and it's not too confusing.
Okay, these were the last two slides, if I'm not mistaken, Paperboy.
Which ones?
Are these the two last? Have you got any more slides after that one?
No, that's
yeah.
So, okay. So there's two slides, two new arguments that he's brought. Brother Yemeni, if you want to do a recap, maybe of something that you can.
No. That's not. Those are not his arguments. He's just recapping over what his intention is. He does that at the beginning of every stream. So what we're going to do is actually continue from where we left off last time, and I believe it's this slide.
Yeah. So we missed this one as well. This was about the Tawheed, about Zoroastrianism. So I did want to just quickly go over that because there was a sort of disagreement in terms of what monotheism was. So I thought this would be a good starting point.
No, but we did cover this in episode 1. I think.
Did we go over this one?
We did, and we even had that discussion, and it came up in the Q&A about Zoroastrianism.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought we did cover this.
Okay, that's fine.
So let's go to where we actually left off from the last stream.
So we did the preservation of
You've
the
done
Quran.
this one too. You've done this one too. I'm sure you've done this one too. Yasser Qadi was mentioned, and
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure if we actually covered this. I did mention
we stopped at the preservation. The producer saw it like this.
Yeah.
The next one was the preserved Quran. We said we'll start new on this one.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Right. So do you want to explain this slide for me, and then we'll do our little 10 minutes.
So this one, in terms of one of the evidences, you said, can Satan make such a guarantee if Muhammad was deceived? So the statement in the Quran, which claims the Quran well, if the Quran is a product of deception, then this. So yes, essentially your argument was no devil has the power to ensure that the Quran was preserved throughout time. So if that was an evidence in itself, I believe, of the fact that Muhammad wasn't deceived.
Yeah, so it's an argument to say he wasn't deceived. He couldn't have been deceived because over here, this is a falsification test as well, right? This is part of the falsification test that I was mentioning with regards to its preservation. Now, the thing is, with regards to this, okay, first and foremost, do you agree that no devil has the power to do something like this? So if, to preserve something to the on a godly level, where nothing in that could ever potentially happen could alter the text or the meaning.
So I would say I think it's a bit of a loaded question, just for the fact that two reasons. One would be, we have books that are preserved from religious books or just your yellow pages. So that in itself, preservation, that in itself wouldn't guarantee that it's from God, because we would have to say, why would it, and what type of preservation would it mean? I think it's a bit of a loaded question to say if it was. So we have to understand, what do we mean by perfect preservation? You could say it's an evidence, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a proof within itself.
No, I wouldn't say it's a loaded question, because I'm asking about Satan's capabilities. The thing is, so far in our discussions, you seem to give Satan godly powers. So that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, but I feel the pretext is that if it's preserved perfectly, it's from God. But then why would Satan? So if Satan introduced a book and preserved it, why are we saying that it couldn't be from Satan? So the argument would be that Satan couldn't preserve something, but I don't think that. So I don't think in itself that's an evidence. So we would say there are many religious books out there. I've forgotten the name. The Sikh books, for example. If the Sikh books have been preserved since its inception, that wouldn't mean that the Sikh books is from God, because you agree with me that
you're missing the point. You're missing the point. I agree with you that there are other works that are preserved. Okay, we look at Greek texts that have been preserved, right? For example, that's not the point. The point isn't about preservation, okay? But because even these books here, even the yellow pages needs updates, right? Edits and all of that. So it's not, when we talk about preservation here, we're talking about the original thing, right? Not the additions and all of that. So that's why you never hear about editions of the Quran, right? You hear about the variants of the readings, right? But you don't hear about editions of Quran. Now, with regards to this, the reason why it's important, it's because it's a falsification test. It is a claim that so this ayah here that I'm presenting, it is mentioning that the Quran is the author, and that he is the one that is going to preserve it. So now we have a very specific claim. Now the claim is that God is the one that is authoring this book, and he is the one that is going to preserve it. So now we are looking for a godly level of preservation, not a human type of preservation. So that's hence the question. Are you now willing to give Satan godly powers and say that he is capable of getting to that level in preservation?
Well, so again, for the sake of this, I will go along with it. I obviously disagree with that statement in itself, because that's why I gave you the example of other religious scriptures where they can make the same claims. I wouldn't then say that those scriptures are from God. But if the Quran says the argument is the perfect preservation isn't evidence, then I'm happy to explore that claim. Obviously, I would disagree with the premise, but I'm happy to for almost like a thought experiment to explore that claim as an evidence that it would mean it's from God.
Yeah, but this doesn't make sense, because how can the thing is, when you're looking for a falsification test, you're accepting the claim. You're going to have to take the premise that the claim is for you want to test the premise, right? The premise here is that God is the author, right? So if you want to say that it's actually Satan that's the author masquerading as God, you would actually have to explain whether you believe that Satan has godly powers.
But then, see, that's where I believe it's maybe not right term, a loaded question, because the pretext assumes that only God, it's a godly power to preserve something without any alterations. So that's why I'm very hesitant to agree with that premise, because I disagree, and that's why
this is the thing. Like, if you can give me another book, right? Like, for example, the Qur'an is on a different level, right? Because the Qur'an was revealed with its variants, right? Our history is already known that it's a multiform text and a multiform reading, oral tradition. So that was from its inception, okay? Now, we can't say the same about Aristotle or any of the Greek texts, or even the Bible. The Bible doesn't claim to be revealed with variant texts, right? Or as we see in the manuscripts. So hence, we can't claim these to be preserved from the original sources, right? From the archetypes.
Right. So
however, right, so this is why I'm talking about there's a difference between a human level of preservation. When we talk about preservation on the human level, we say we have what is extant. And that is what we refer to in terms of preservation, right? In one sense.
Right. So just to interject, obviously I will have my own personal bias. So to approach this in an objective way, what I would have to do is look at the claim and see whether that claim holds up. So that's why asking me that question is a bit loaded for me, because that's something you cannot necessarily answer objectively. But
but you underlined it.
Pardon?
Yeah, but the thing is, you underlined it as being a point to address, right? Yet no devil has such power to ensure that this happens throughout time. So that's what I'm bringing up.
Yeah, so I'm going to explore the claim, whether I agree with it or not. I will not insert my personal opinion. This will be a case of, okay, if that isn't evidence that it's from God, let us explore the claim. Let us understand what the hypothesis is, and see whether that holds up in itself.
Okay, well, before I move on and address the quotes that you have here, it's just very interesting to me how throughout our discussion over, you seem to give Satan godly powers, and then when I ask you, does Satan have such an ability, you're hesitant to say no. You could say no, but you don't accept the argument. You could still reject the idea that Satan has godly powers, but you don't seem to do that. But let me address what you're saying here with Yasser Qali. Now, when he says that hasn't even been 2 copies of the Quran that are different, even one letter or one word, then it says the Quran is the most protected of all scriptures, and God protected his Quran from any kind of alteration, deviation, or miswriting. Okay. All Qurans. Okay, so let me first address the first 2 points, and then we'll go on. Okay. No 2 copies of the Quran that are different. That is true, right? Because the Quran in of itself is a multiform text, right? So any reading of the Quran that you see is, right, the Quran, right? Now, when you look at them as the readings, you will never find two of the same reading that are different, right? You will never find that.
Define what you mean by reading.
Well, so for the reading of Hafs or the reading of Warsh, right? So the Qira'at, okay? Those are the readings. You will never find a Warsh different to another Warsh, right? In any place, not even a letter or a word. So this statement is true. And then, of course, he says it's the scripture that Allah has protected, hence the Quranic ayah. Now, when he says any kind of alteration, this is true. Deviation, this is true. Miswriting is not true, because we know that there are scribal errors within the manuscripts. Okay, this is demonstrable. However, it is not a change or an alteration, because when we compare the manuscripts of the Quran, we can see for example, in the 7th century, the 9th century, and there'll be an odd manuscript in the 8th century with a thing, but it doesn't affect the preceding or subsequent manuscripts. You see the corrections, right? So whereas to make a comparison quickly with the New Testament manuscripts, when you see a change, that change, we see it in future manuscripts, but that's not the case within the Quran. Now, miswriting, scribal errors, this is a human error, but the protection of Allah, this is beyond that, where he has these corrected.
So in terms of the original Quran that was revealed, in what was revealed
in its original form as it was recited by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. So we're not even talking about an archetype or an original manuscript. We're saying from the source. Okay. From the source we have it.
And that would be perfectly protected from Allah.
Yeah, that's never been changed.
Okay.
Right. So wait, go back. Now let's talk about the next thing. So it says all Qur'ans, even up to our time, confirm letter for letter, word for word, the Uthman Mus'haf. Now let me ask you here, because I think there's a huge misunderstanding amongst specifically the Christians when they discuss this topic. What do you understand of the Uthmanic Mus'haf?
So I understand that Uthman compiled a standardized version.
How many?
And that's, pardon?
How many?
I believe, well, it was one, and then he sent it out to different regions.
No. And that's the mistake. See, the thing is, people think that Uthman commissioned one manuscript. There were 6. There was 6 manuscripts commissioned, right? Sent out to 6 of the regions. Okay. Now this is the history, and then you have the master copy, which is his personal Mus'haf. Okay. Now the reason why we see, and this goes into the qira'at and the differences, right? With regards to the rasm, right? The skeletal text in of itself. There are some variants where the skeletal text differs because there are different words. Now that is because it comes from those readings. The rasm of Uthman, he sent out 6 manuscripts, 6 masahif, out to 6 regions, right? And they contained the ahruf, right? And this is where the readings came from, right? The qira'at came from, and they are very closely related. So this is the history. So when he says with the Uthmanic Mus'haf, it's actually masahif, right? So this is why,
if you're saying he made 6 different ones, wouldn't this have been a byproduct of what Muhammad had already established? Because if he had gone through the Quran every year at Ramadan, and then twice towards the end
on the last year,
with Jibreel, then we know we had what's his name, Hafsa's Quran, which was by Umar. So
where again?
So we had, before Uthman, we had the
Hafsa,
the codex that Hafsa had, which was which was Umar, from Umar's time.
No, it was from Abu Bakr.
Sorry, that's it. Yeah, Abu Bakr, the compilation. So we're saying Muhammad revealed the final standardized version to the companions. So then where do we get Uthman then making 6?
Right, okay.
Because we already had that process established by Muhammad.
No, so Rasul recited the Quran in 7 ahruf, right? Now those ahruf he taught to various companions, right? Some companions he taught one, and to other companions he taught another, right?
Was that in totality or partially?
No, in totality. Right. So all the 7 ahruf have been revealed, right, and conveyed to the Sahaba. Now, what happened is, remember, you have to also remember the timeline. Abu Bakr, during the reign of Abu Bakr.
So do we know the names of the Sahaba that he taught the complete version to?
What do you mean, like all the ahruf at the same time?
Well, yeah, you said that.
That's not required. That's not required. Okay.
No, but that's what I'm asking you, because you said there was a complete. I asked you, did he recite the Quran in full to the companions? You said yes. So I'm then asking on as a follow-on question.
Yeah.
Do we have the names of those people that learned the Quran in totality?
What do you mean by in totality? Are you talking about like one Sahabi learning all 7 ahruf?
Well, that would be the 114.
Or various.
Yeah. So even if it was, so for example, so I'm trying to say the Quran 114 surahs.
Yes.
So then you have the different qira'at, but I'm saying, so would one companion have known all 114 surahs as taught by Muhammad?
Oh, of course.
Or would they have known partially?
No. So look, it depends on the Sahabi, right? And it depends when he accepted Islam and so on and so forth. But we have in our histories, right, the names of every single, what do you call it, Sahabi that memorized the Quran in its entirety. Hence the ijaza, right? So when we get our ijaza, when we memorize the Quran. So if I went to a teacher and I asked him to teach me the Quran and to help me and to get me to memorize the entire Quran, he would have a certificate, which is known as an ijaza, right? And the ijaza will be the chain of narration of all the huffaz that he learned from, and his teachers and his teachers and his teachers, going back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every single hafid today has this certificate, which shows the chain of narration or the chains of transmission.
So my question is, which can you name the Sahaba who knew? So what I'm trying to say is, Muhammad went through the Quran twice with Jibril, so he would have obviously, the Quran said, today your religion is perfected for you. So he would clearly have taught some of the Sahaba that final recension of the recitation.
No, that's okay. So this is what Rasulullah did with Jibril, was Jibril checking on Rasulullah. Okay. Now the Quran, and make sure, because we go, remember, it came down piecemeal. And Jibril alayhi salam will tell Rasulullah where these verses will go, in which order, right? And then Rasulullah will convey that to the companions and everything. But every year he would revise the Quran.
Yeah, so I'm saying in the final year.
So in the final year, when he did that, okay, he did that twice, but the Sahaba still memorized the Quran, right?
Yeah, so I'm saying, my question is, did they know the final recension of the Quran?
What do you mean by recension?
So he's reviewed it twice with Angel Gabriel.
Yeah, but in the same, it didn't change.
Yeah, so I'm saying, in terms of the process, he learned the Quran twice.
No, he didn't learn the Quran twice. He was like in the same way, like you sit down with your teacher and you go back what you already know.
Yeah, right, so he went over it to review. Then I'm saying, before he died, did he teach the Quran, the final version that was approved, in totality to the Sahaba?
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying to you. There was no final version that was approved, right?
So he didn't leave a final version with the companions?
No, because look, every time when the Quran was finished in terms of its revelation, the Huffaz, the Sahaba that he taught, okay, they memorized it. Okay, so which means they knew the entirety of the Quran in its 114 chapters. So before the Rasul died, there isn't a single Hafid, right? Because it's a contradiction. How can you have a memorizer of the Quran when he hasn't memorized the whole Quran? So hence, like Abu Bakr, Uthman, Umar, Ali, Zayd ibn Thabit, right? And all these famous Sahaba that we keep hearing about, they were all memorizers of the Quran, right? So this is to name a few. But like I mentioned to you, to today, every single person, the millions of people that have memorized the Quran, each and every one of them has a chain of narration, or a chain of transmission, a chain of transmission of the Quran from them all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And only then are they qualified to teach as well.
Yeah, but I think I'm just more focusing on the immediate aftermath. So whether people
but the immediate aftermath, the Sahaba knew the entirety of the Quran.
Okay, so in terms of the hadith where it says your Prophet said, learn the Quran from 4 people, including Ibn Masud, Ubay.
Yeah.
I can't remember the other two. So would those have been
Ubay ibn Ka'b,
the four? Yes, would those have been the four people, for example, who you could name who knew the Quran 114 surahs?
Yeah.
Okay, so if those are some of the people that learned the final version, why would Uthman
It's not a
have
final
made
version. It's not a final version. Okay,
So,
it's
so
Quran. There's no version. There are no versions of the Quran.
When I say final version, I just mean simply in terms of the one that was left to be given to the Ummah. So, in terms of when I say final version, it just means
right. Look, you're struggling. Hold on a second. You're struggling. There is we have to be careful with our terminology, right? Because we've got to remember the Quran is a multiform text, inherently. It's inherently a multiform text. Now, Ubay ibn Ka'b and Ibn Mas'ud, they had different. They were teaching the people in different readings as well, right? Which is why you see a tradition, right, from Ibn Mas'ud to Abu Amr, for example, right, which is one of the Qurra, okay, and then Subhanallah. Completely went out of my head. But you have these, they were reading different readings. Okay, so the 7 ahruf were in circulation already. Okay, now when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, you have to remember the context of the time. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu compiled the Quran between two boards, right, making it a book. That was done in the Qurayshi dialect, okay,
right.
or in the harf, the first harf, right, essentially that was revealed to them. So that was his intention. Okay. Now the intention of Uthman radiallahu anhu was to ensure that the ahruf, the 7 ahruf, were preserved in the text as well as because now during his reign,
so were those 7 ahruf in Hafs's codex?
So that would have been the harf that was originally revealed, right? Because after that, it was during I think Ta'if, where Mikael and Jibra'il came down, and he learned the other 6. Okay, so Abu Bakr's intention was to compile a harf of the Quran. Okay,
and that was based on the Battle of Yamama, where people were being
70 were killed. Okay,
right.
and
so they were in fear that the Quran or parts of it would be lost with the reciters who died. So therefore, it was copied into a hard copy. Right. So then, how do we then go from that to Uthman?
No problem.
Then engaging in a process to then send out 6 to the different regions.
Let me explain. You have to remember that the fear, this was simply a fear that the Quran could be lost, right? Because if they engaged in more battles and more Huffaz died. The reality is that didn't happen, right? Hence why the compilation was even able to happen. And because the criteria as well was to have 2 written texts and 2 memorizers, okay? So that even though the committee themselves were memorizers of the Quran, but to make doubly sure or triple sure that they had it right, okay? Now this included the ahruf, right? People who have memorized their different readings taught by Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So they would be the first recipients. Hence, 6 masahif were then commissioned and sent out to 6 regions.
So just for time, that's why I'm just interjecting. So in terms of the Quran that Ibn Mas'ud had learned from the Prophet, do we find that today? Because if he was, we do, and we find we don't. So we find all the verses that he had.
The Qira'ah of
So in terms of the verses that he learned from Muhammad, we still find those today in the Quran that we have. So it was all incorporated into the Uthmanic text. So why was there disagreement between Ibn Mas'ud and Uthman if it
was only regarding his personal copy? Ibn Mas'ud didn't want to forego his personal copy. That's all it was.
So you're saying his personal copy was exactly letter for letter, word for word, the same as the Uthmanic Razm?
Yeah. The only difference is in his Mus'haf is that he did not include 3 chapters, right? Sorry, no, it was Ibn Mas'ud that had 2 additional, which Christians unfortunately think is actually 2 additional chapters. They're not. They are actually qunut, right?
Well,
So they are prayers. So that's all he had, and this is not uncommon, right? Many people who had their personal copies would put down additional material into their masahif, and that is the exact reason. Hold on a second. That is the exact reason why Uthman radiallahu anhu had them all burned, because what he didn't want to happen is that people's personal notes get transmitted, and people start thinking that it is part of the Quran when it's not. So in the case of Ibn Mas'ud, for example, if Ibn Mas'ud left his qunut in his own personal copy, and his personal copy was then distributed amongst the ummah, there could be a time where the qunut will be taken as Quran because it's in his personal copy, when even though it's not. In the same way that we had 1 John 5:7, right, where it was in the margins, then it was put into the text, and then at some point people started to believe it was part of the biblical text, and then only after textual criticism it was proved that it wasn't.
Just to interject, so there's problems with that statement because, one, we know that there, in terms of the dispute with Ibn Mas'ud, we know his students utilized his codex for even there's evidence up to 100 years. And 2, we have, for example, the Sana manuscript, and the analysis of the Sana manuscript shows that there's the undertext, which is pre-Uthmanic, and that was different from the Uthmanic version that we have. So in terms of some of the
which Uthmanic? No, see, this is the thing. What they are comparing it to is the master copy,
right?
So Uthman's personal Mus'haf. That is what they're comparing it to.
Well, that's the Quran, the version that we use today.
So this is the thing. Uthman's personal copy was in which harf?
The Quraysh.
The Qurayshi harf, right? Ibn Mas'ud's reading is different to that,
right? So I'm saying
hence the differences.
Yeah, so I'm saying with the Sana manuscript, it doesn't correlate in totality to what we have today, but scholars will agree that this was
the scholars. Yeah, that's fine. But the scholars also acknowledge, when they studied the palimpsest, is that none of the variants are actually unknown to the Muslims. We know those variants because we find them in other readings, right?
Well, so they're not in the 7 canonical readings that are utilized today. Right. So most
canonical will be again an incorrect term. From the 7 that Ibn Mujahid, right, Saba al-Mutawatir, right? That's what you would say. The 7 mass transmitted, right, readings. Okay. Now the other 3. What about the other 3 mass transmitted? And there are other aspects of the Qur'an, which is a long subject, but like you said,
well, this is why we go into the claim of what does perfect preservation mean.
So what perfect preservation means is that we have the original as it was revealed. Do we have that? Yes, we do.
Original in what sense? In the copies that we have today, or
as what was taught by Jibril alayhi salam to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to us. That is the original.
So are you saying in the Quran that we have today, or are you saying that we can still
Quran we have today? The Quran we have today, same. It's the original.
Okay, so it was exactly how it was revealed, and you said perfect preservation would be, no additions, no deletions, and so forth.
Yeah. So that's what it is, and as he said, in its original words since the Prophet's death, when revelation ended, and that is accurate.
Okay, so then how would you account for something like the Sana manuscript, where there's an underlying text where that text doesn't appear?
I have explained to you, as I mentioned, right? The variants that are found in the undertext, we know where they are. We can trace them back to the Prophet's eyes.
But you said they were in the current. They should be in the. You said the Quran that we have today
Okay.
is exactly.
See, this is because you don't understand. This is because, again, you have to understand what we mean, okay? Because it's a multi-form text, right? So it's a multi-form text. So even if we had one variant of the Quran, it's still preserved, because it's still
According to who?
because it's still the original. No, according to the definition, because it's still the original.
So
you don't have to, because it's impossible for anyone to recite all the variants. Hold on a second. Because the Quran is a recital, right? It's a recital. So it's impossible for you to recite all the variants at the same time. You can't do that, all right? So even if there is only one recitation that we have left, right? Let's say the Hafs was the only thing we had. That is still the original, as was revealed.
But that's not perfect preservation, because perfect preservation would mean that you preserved everything as it was, as you initially said, as it was originally revealed. So for argument's sake, let's say that was preservation, but that wouldn't categorize as perfect preservation, because when I said Satan could preserve something, you said I'm attributing godly powers to him. So
Yeah.
godly, most people would assume or perceive godly powers of preservation would be preserving everything as it was revealed in its context, not that some of it was partially revealed, because I could then make that same claim about the Bible. Well, some of the core texts are perfect, are preserved as it was revealed since then. So even if there's an addition, we still have the original within that. So we know that this is an addition because we still have preserved the original. So that's why it doesn't correlate with the term of perfect preservation.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try and keep it brief so that we can move on. But like I say, perfect preservation, right? When we say that something is perfectly preserved, it means that we have the original, right? Now, the original would be that which Rasul taught to his companions, right? Now, for example, like I said, if we only had, let's say, forget Hafs, because Abu Amr is a better example, because we were talking about Ibn Mas'ud. Let's say we only had the reading of Ibn Mas'ud, which was transmitted through Abu Amr to us, okay? That is still perfectly preserved, because that is what Rasul taught to Ibn Mas'ud, okay? And the thing is, like I said to you, by the way, this is not the case. We still, even though, right, like I said, it's a huge subject, and you know that I'm working on this, and we're going to present a hell of a lot of information on this. But we know about the variants that were revealed. All the 7 ahruf, we know about them. We know about the readings of the Quran, and we can trace every single one back to the Prophet today, whether they are being read or not. Right. The point is, we still have it. So the thing is here, it's not about if I went my entire life just reading one reading of the Quran, okay, I still have the original. That's the point. Nothing's been changed from it, because it is still a reading that the Prophet ﷺ taught.
But if there are deletions, then we wouldn't.
What deletions? What's been deleted?
Well, I'm asking. Well, I'm making a.
Nothing's been deleted.
So nothing's been deleted.
Nothing's been deleted.
So if you look at Ibn Mas'ud's codex,
it's just the majority of the world just picks a reading and goes with it.
So
I'm sorry, guys. I think we need to move on. It's been nearly an hour. Hopefully, we can do maybe a recap. On part 5, we can probably do a recap and touch on these topics again.
Okay, no problem.
So if you want to go to the next slide, that would be fantastic.
No problem, inshallah.
Okay.
Let's see this. Okay, so Malik and Malik.
Yeah, so I'll just explain this. So this is from EVQ. This is a website developed by Shady Nasser as by Harvard. So it's an encyclopedia of all the variant readings of the Quran, and this is from manuscripts and that are stated within the Islamic sources. So, for example, I've just taken a screenshot of Surah Al-Fatiha, and here are all some of the 21 variants within just the one verse in terms of the word Maliki. So in 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, 1-4. So the way this website works, anyone can go and have a look at it. Where it's black, it's consistent. Where anything's grayed out, there are variants throughout the Islamic history. So you can see 7 readings, the 10 readings, and so forth. So there's an even further breakdown of where these information has been found. So
no problem. Taught to us by Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Same point as before.
So you're saying all of these were taught by Prophet Muhammad?
Yeah, because we wouldn't be able to deviate from it.
Well, that can't be true, because if you look at GR, these are where there's grammatical errors. So Mim 7 is a typo. So that couldn't have been taught by Muhammad. And
no, hold on a second. There's a difference between a reading and a what do you call it, a scribal error. I'm talking about readings.
So which readings were taught by Muhammad?
A typo is just a scribal error.
Yeah, so we have the Shad non-Uthmanic, which is the CD. So you can see that would be 14, 15, 16, 17. So are you saying these would have been taught by Muhammad as well?
Right. So there's two aspects of Shad, right? Some of them are inauthentic, right? And some of them are just simply no longer read. Okay, that's all it means. Okay, now you would have to go through each and every one and actually and see which one is inauthentic, and which one is what do you call it, no longer read and stuff. But this goes into the whole ulum al-Qur'an as well. So you actually have to have knowledge of ulum al-Qur'an to be able to go through this and actually know what it's
saying.
So
the reason why I brought this up, because obviously if you look at 482, do they not ponder upon the Quran? Had it been from any other than Allah, they would have surely found in it within there much discrepancy. So what we're seeing here is many discrepancies between some of the variant readings, because you're saying it was Shad's, it was part of the 7 readings, it will go back to Muhammad. I'm saying
so Shad, like for example, these ones that are Shad, go back. These ones that are Shad, all right, they are. Let me have a look at these.
So what I'm just trying to, so this for the audience. So we have the premise, and that's why I said objectively, if we're looking at perfect preservation, then
where it says, so where, for example, right, where it says gives ownership, right, this is not part of the this is an inauthentic reading. Whereas the other ones, Meliki, where it says king, those are no longer read, basically. But we know, but the thing is, but just to show you how deep the preservation is, even though they are no longer read, we still know what they are.
So in terms of,
we know what is inauthentic. This is the thing, because of the preservation of the Quran, we know when there is an inauthentic reading.
Well, not necessarily.
No, we do.
When you look through Islamic literature, so in terms of the popularity of some of the Qira'at and so forth, there were different methodologies that were used as to accepting what went back to Muhammad. It wasn't necessarily chains of narration, for example. It was sometimes based on the popularity of a reading. So there seems to be much discrepancy in terms of.
Okay, no, that's not true. That's not true. It's always been about there's a couple of things here, right? It was about the chain of transmission and the Arabic language, right? So the Arabic language is important here. Hence why you have the grammarians, right? That were speaking about, you would have them heavily involved in ulum al-Quran, okay? Because the Arabic language was very important. And it was like you look at in any book on ulum al-Quran, it's always about, you always see chains of transmission, chains of narration. That's the key, right? So like I said, we know when there is something shared, when there is something gharib, right? We understand these things when we go through the books. So what we have, so the readings, like I said, this table is actually showing you that we know the Quran so intimately that even the readings that are no longer read, we still know we still know what they are. So you're actually proving the
but
preservation.
But that doesn't mean the Quran is perfectly preserved, because we would assume the recitation.
No, it means we have it. No,
so you're trying to say the knowledge of it.
No. What I said to you is perfectly preserved is that we have the original. The original we have. Just because there are readings that we don't read, for example, or are not popular, that doesn't make it any less perfectly preserved. The point is here, as displayed by this table, we know what do you call it? Even, you know, we know that the we know that.
What do you mean when you say by the original? Just to be clear,
what was recited by Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam
with no deletions.
Yeah, no deletions, no alterations, none of that. But all right, let's move on, because this is, like I said, we've already covered this with the previous slide as well.
So here I have a slide of an example of some deletions. So
yeah, I tell you guys, we do want to learn. We need to learn from the first claim that you bought. That what we're doing. There's 3 examples. I think we should have 10 minutes max on each example. So it's half an hour. Otherwise, it will just go on. You know, if that makes any sense.
I don't think we'll need it. We don't need it. What do you call it?
But I'll just monitor it just in case.
Yeah, but just because all of these 3 are hadith, are they during the lifetime of Rasul or after his passing?
What do you mean?
These narrations, right? Are they talking about during the lifetime of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or after his passing?
This would be, I presume, during his lifetime.
Right. So there is a concept in the revelation of the Quran called abrogation, right?
Okay.
Right. What does Allah say regarding abrogation?
So Allah says, if we don't cause something to be lost or forgotten, unless we bring something similar or something better.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what he says in the Quran, and there are 3 forms of abrogation. What are they?
So in terms of abrogation,
there are 3 forms.
Abrogation. There's the legal rulings. I can't remember the.
Okay.
Off the top of my head,
you can have.
So there's naskh.
Naskh is abrogation.
Right.
So there are 3 forms.
Legal status.
Okay, you got to be more specific.
Yeah, go on. I'll let you explain.
Right. So you can have the ruling and the verse removed, right? Right, abrogated, right? Done away with. Now you can have, you can have both. Then you can have the verse remaining, but the ruling abrogated. Or you can have the verse abrogated. The rule. I mixed it up. So the first one is both being abrogated. The second one is the verse remains, the rule or the law is abrogated. And the third one is that the law remains and the verse is abrogated. Those are the 3 types.
So let me just skip forward just quickly
So this is just because of these examples that you have, I'm trying to make up the time that we spent on the last couple of slides. So to briefly say to you, right, if you want to show there was deletion of the Quran, you would have to provide a hadith or any Islamic literature that shows that the Quran was lost after, right, the Prophet's passing. So that what the companions were reading at the Prophet's passing, some of that got lost. That's what you have to prove. None of these 3 examples actually shows that.
Well, I can do that, but this clearly shows you this is what they were.
Then do that, because deletion of the Quran.
That's why I said let's skip this. We can go back to side. I'll just, for the sake of argumentation. So we have here from Sahih Muslim. So it says Sahih Muslim 1452a. Aisha reported that had it Aisha reported that it had been revealed in the Holy Quran that 10 clear sucklings make a marriage unlawful. Then it was abrogated. So, as you asked me, the rules of abrogation by 5 sucklings. That was something similar. And Allah's apostle died, and it was before that time found in the Holy Quran recited by the Muslims. So now we have something that was recited by the Muslims at the time of Muhammad. Aisha is now saying, confirming it was recited by at the time of Muhammad. So can we now see where this verse of 5 sucklings exists? And if you say it was abrogated, can we see a hadith or some sort of confirmation from one of the Sahaba that says, yes, it was abolished or abrogated or what? Because currently this fits the criteria that you gave me, that you asked.
Yeah, no problem. That's fine. It's not a problem. So when she says, first and foremost, a Sahaba or a Sahabi, what do you call it? There isn't a closer Sahabi to the Prophet ﷺ than his wife, right? She's his closest companion, right? So she's actually telling you it was abrogated. Now, when she said that, what do you call it? After he died, it was found in the Holy Quran with the Muslims. You have to remember something. It was every ayah was scribed, right? And the news didn't reach every single Muslim, right? So this is what I'm saying to you.
Yeah, but where's the evidence that it was abrogated?
Okay,
so you're saying you're making a claim, but I'm asking for the evidence.
Yeah, no, it fits one of the 3 criteria. In terms of the suckling, you won't find the verse because the verse was abrogated, but the ruling remained. This is one of the forms of abrogation.
Well, the ruling doesn't remain because the 5 sucklings is not applicable to Muslims anymore.
No, it was 10. Then it was brought down to 5. The 5 still.
And I'm saying 5 is not applicable, so it can't be.
What do you mean it's not applicable?
So are you saying? Pardon? Are you saying 5 sucklings is still part of like Sharia law, or to make a marriage unlawful?
Yeah, but there's a specific ruling for it. It's not for adults. It's
so
regarding what do you call it? The young.
Yeah. So are you saying if we were in a Sharia compliant society, that this verse,
it's still applicable?
That there would still be okay.
The ruling is still applicable. I thought you knew this, man. I thought you knew that this ruling is still applicable, but the verse is not in the Quran. So you asking me to find the verses. We know that the verses have been abrogated from the Quran, but the ruling remains. This is not a good example. Then you have over here about the 200 verses again during the lifetime. Okay. What do you call it? Because those were abrogated, right? Those verses were abrogated.
Yeah, but so just to stick with the 5 sucklings one. So do we have, because what it seems to be is that in terms of the keeping the ruling, that only started to apply from the verse of the stoning, but we don't actually see that as something that was communicated.
That's not true.
So in terms of where do you get the basis that the verse where it can be you keep the ruling, but you remove the text of the Quran? Remember, this whole question is about.
This is the evidence. This is the evidence of it. So when the scholars mention about the 3 types of abrogation, where do you think they get the evidence from? They get it from the ahadith regarding abrogation.
So I'm asking, what is the evidence? Because
this is the evidence.
You should be saying within the Quran or Muhammad explicitly taught. If you're going to by the scholars, then that is just an external opinion.
No. This is, the scholars are examining the the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, right? And his wives. So this is what his wife is saying. Aisha radiallahu anha is giving us the context here. She's telling us it was abrogated, right? The verses were abrogated.
She's saying it was abrogated by 5, and she's saying that it was that found within the Quran.
This is a solitary hadith. There are other hadith that mention about the same thing, right? You have to read all of these hadith, right? Hence why this says nothing about 10, right? For example, right? It just says it was abrogated and substituted by 5. And it mentions nothing about 10. So where did I get 10 from? by the other hadith I
Yeah,
mentioned.
is it right there? Holy Quran,
Regarding-
10 clear sucklings on the second line.
Is it on the second line? Oh, sorry, my bad. I thought it didn't. It's very small. Sorry. Okay, my apologies. But so
So she's clearly indicating that there was 10. It was abrogated.
and abrogated down to 5, right? So she's talking about the ruling, right? So she's talking about the ruling, and then what do you call it? And she's saying it was found in the Quran. Okay, now why wasn't it included in the Mus'haf of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, for example? Is because they knew that it was no longer part of the Quran. Right.
So do you have evidence of that, or are you just making a claim?
No, I'm not making a claim.
So what is the evidence?
Because Abu Bakr was a hafid of the Quran. Okay, so was Uthman, so was Ibn Mas'ud, so was what do you call it?
Yeah. Is there
none of them? Hold on a second. None of them included it. None of them included these verses in the Masahif, and none of them recited it. Right. So now, when it says, it was.
Like I provided the evidence, can you provide me
you're asking me to provide
source?
Hold on a second.
I'm asking, is there an authentic source, because you may not have it on hand?
Yeah, that's fine.
Validates what you're saying.
Pick up any manuscript of the Quran.
I'm saying in terms of a hadith that explains what you're saying, not saying, well, because they didn't recite it, therefore that's almost like equivocating. I'm asking for clear-cut evidence from a hadith where Aisha expands, or one of the other Sahaba expand and say, actually, we stop. That's
not how evidence works. If you want unequivocal statements for everything, I mean, you're going to put yourself in a very bad place if I decide to use that criteria on you, right? So don't apply double standards with regards to.
Well, I'm asking where you're just saying, well, this is what it must mean.
No. So evidence is not always, what do you call it, unequivocal or explicit, is it? It's not always like that. So what I'm saying to you is that the Muslims at the time, those who knew the Prophet ﷺ, they did not recite it, they did not scribe it, okay, in terms of the official manuscripts, right? Whether it was in the Mus'haf of Abu Bakr or in the Sahih.
Yeah, but I can just also use, for example,
you have to know. Hold on a second.
You're saying it's reasonable. But I'm saying, for example, during the Battle of Yamama, how do we know the people that died weren't
only 70? How many companions were there at the time?
So, but if there was only 70,
about 100,000 Muslims. Yeah, right? Most of which memorized the Quran.
Not all of them.
I said most of which memorized the Quran. 70 died. Okay, so they said, look, we've lost 70. That's still a big number, right? Even if you have hold on a second. See, no, now you're going into speculation. I'm going actually based on what history. I'm not actually speculating. I'm not speculating anything. Am I speculating that the ones who commissioned the Masahif were memorizers of the Quran? No, I'm not speculating that.
No, you're speculating that they didn't include it because it was abrogated.
No, this is not a speculation. We're talking about the memorizers of the Quran. Those, as we discussed earlier, those who received the complete Quran, the full 114 chapters from the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, those are the people we are talking about. So we know that they received the entirety of the Quran. You have to bear in mind, these people also lived at the same time that Aisha radiallahu anha was narrating this
statement seems odd, because you're saying if there was so many in the hundreds or even thousands who had recited the Quran, if only 70 of them had died, then there would not need to be a fear to compile the Quran into.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because the Muslims, we safeguard everything. This is why, even when it comes to our belief of shirk, for example, we were playing chess on Sunday, right? What was it? Today's Tuesday. 2 days ago, right? And some of the Muslims were in the chat and they were like, "Oh, chess is haram. We're not supposed to play chess." Do you know what the reason is? Do you know why that ruling exists? Why some of the scholars have made that ruling? Because chess has small statues, and statues have been worshipped in history. Now, even though I'm a Muslim and I'm firm in my faith, I still can't play. I still can't use these small statues to play chess with, just in case just in case, Satan tries to get through to me through chess and gets me to start worshipping chess pieces. That is the level of care that Muslims have with regards to their religion. Likewise, and we got this one.
That's a false equivocation.
No,
I think you're imposing something that we're looking at the evidence. So you're giving me I'm not giving you a
belief. Okay. We're in that stage where we're talking over each other, all due respect. Let's 30 seconds at least, or a minute each, to have your argument, and then so the argument.
Let me just finish.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm just going to finish my statement. I'll tell you why it's not a false equivocation, because it's showing the level of care, right? So something that seems so far-fetched, we would still think of it as a potential issue. That is the point I'm driving at. So for the Sahaba in the case of Yamama, 70, even though it's a small number compared to the amount of companions that were alive at the time, even though it was a thing that would be rare to happen, that we would lose the Qur'an, they still took the precaution to still have it compiled into book form so that it can be taught. So what I'm saying to you is not of speculation. We know that these people were not only memorizers of the Qur'an, but they met Aisha radiallahu anha. They are aware of her statement here. Now, and she's aware of what they recited. So if she thought that those verses should have been in the Quran, we would have a narration by her saying as such. Because there are narrations, okay, of the disagreements between the Sahaba. So if she had a disagreement with regards to it being scribed by Abu Bakr and by Uthman, because she was alive during both of their reigns, right? She would have said something.
Okay, Paperboy, if you want to respond, you can have the same minute. Go and respond.
Okay. So clearly, in terms of what Al-Yemeni has done, he's not given any evidence at all. So I brought him the clear evidence that says that there was a verse that was abrogated. It was being repeated and recited at the time of Muhammad, and this is what he asked me to provide. He himself has not provided any evidence. It's just pure speculation. So if we look at the quote on the left, where it says, lurking behind the sentiment is the Quranic manuscripts, for example, act as a sensitivity to Islamic reverence to the Quran, and claims that it's God's eternal speech. So he then says, this continuous oral transmission has prevented textual corruption. This is what Al-Yemeni is arguing, saying, well, there's no hadith that says that affirms that, but there's also no hadith where the companions confirmed that this was abrogated and then the ruling was kept and the text was discarded. He's not provided any evidence. And so clearly what I'm trying to highlight here, in terms of when we look into the claim of perfect preservation, it gets very murky, because we're now getting different contradicting claims, and these claims aren't even backed up by evidence as well. It's just aspersions onto what most likely would have happened. So again, I provided the evidence where we're missing verses, because he says we have the original. If this verse of 5 sucklings was in the original, this is a deletion, it's gone missing, and there is no sufficient evidence that can explain why it's not in there. It's just appealing to what he thinks might have happened or probably did happen, but without actually providing evidence.
Okay, Yemeni, 1 minute to you if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not speculation at all. As I even asked him, what did I actually speculate in? He wasn't able to say anything. I actually used the very hadith he presented as evidence to showcase this. And as mentioned, there is abrogation. All the examples that he provided are evidences of abrogation, which is known to us. It was known to the Sahaba. And this is why they're commenting as they are commenting, right? They are not saying that these are lost, right? None of them are saying that these are lost verses. They are simply saying that they are not there anymore, okay? Because they are no longer meant to be recited. And this was clarified to them by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Aisha radiallahu anha is making a distinction between during the lifetime of Rasul alayhi salam and what was the final revelation, okay, as it was meant to be recited and memorized by the people. That is what she's doing, and that's all he's providing. I'm looking at, by the way, I'm looking at Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, and I can't find this quote because it says volume 1, page 84, but I'm guessing it's because you're taking it from some. I don't even know if Ulum al-Quran is actually Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran is actually translated, or if you got this from somewhere else, because I'm looking at page 84 on here, and I've looked in the previous pages as well, and I can't find this this passage. But then again, this is me looking at it very quickly. Did you get this from an online source, or is there an actual translation of the book?
For which one?
From a Suyuti. Is there an actual translation? Did you get this from an actual translation of the book, or is this extracted from an online source?
This one is utilizing a source, an external source. So I didn't get it from the
It's not from the book.
Some of it has to be translated. Yeah. So
well, that's the thing. Like I said, I have the book here. This is it.
I'll get the. I can.
So if you can get the actual source, then we can have a look at it, because we have to make sure that we're not just taking excerpts from any online source, especially when it's when it's from a book that we don't
that's fine. I'll be able to find it because I've got I actually do have the English translation, but I'll find the source if we do get to do another one, or
no problem,
because I always know that my claims will be checked, so
of course I have to.
I always try to verify anything that I utilize. So this one, so we just gone backwards. So this one is where I highlighted the quotes from Yasir Qadhi behind the scenes. So here I'll read it out to you. So he basically, the first one, he says, how can we understand the Quran as being Kalam Allah when there are clearly some human aspects to it? Haitham Sidki, who is
one at a time.
Okay. So in the two boxes that I've highlighted, so he says the preservation of the Quran cannot then be letter for letter, takshil for takshil narrative that later scholars verbalize and the Muslim Ummah is taught, not just at the Sunday school level, mind you. Rather, the preservation must therefore be interpreted in another manner. And then he says, fact, as per previous paragraphs in this second interpretation, the recitation of the Quran clearly has some human elements in it, far from the faux pas to the Ibjaha. I can't pronounce that. And then he says there are some human aspects to it.
Well, like I said, first and foremost, Yasir Qadhi is not an authority on the Quran, okay? On Ulum al-Quran. That's the first thing. So I couldn't give a damn what he says, right? And no Muslim that takes this subject seriously will also give a damn about what he says regarding the subject. And like I said, I have the books where the evidence show contrary to what he's actually saying. So tashkil, yes, that is exactly the same. Like I said, pick up any two masahif, right, or manuscripts that have tashkil, and you would see they're the same in terms of their readings.
Well, and I think an important thing is because the claim which I showed initially was that most Muslims believe there is one single reading of the Quran, every single Quran. But so just to clarify, so in terms of there's two aspects. One, that we do know that there are different variant readings and differences within some of the different readings.
Yes.
And also,
I don't want to go back, Paperboy. I don't want to go back because we've gone through those slides, and I do apologize if I sound a bit rude, but it's just like I don't want to go back. Let's go forward. And like I said, Brother Yemeni has just said Yasir Qadhi is not a source that we can really take from. So let's move to forward now, please.
Okay, so in terms of Haitham Sidki, who does research on some of the stemma and the sort of development of the the patterns within the Quran. So he says himself, and anyone can go and check this from their tweets and stuff. So I've used it to summarize their arguments. So he said, how do we know the variance between the Uthmanic codices are scribal errors? I get this question a lot. Here's a thread on why we know this to be the case. The simplest explanation is if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. There's some other academics who have quoted on their quotes. So in terms of why he came up to this conclusion, and I will give some examples, is that, for example, he explores the what people say are the different readings, where they say is regional readings, and he's looked at the stemmers and he's looked at how does that correlate with the readings. So in simple terms, if I had a book of Harry Potter and in the English variant it says underwear, or it says trousers, for example.
Stop. It's a false analogy. It's a false analogy. Look, the second aspect, right, is regarding scribal errors. I've already told you, yes, we can. There's evidence of scribal errors. That's not a problem.
Okay, so in terms of what they're saying in terms of scribal errors is that it's been incorporated to some of the readings.
Well,
that's where.
That's not true.
That's what his point is.
Yeah,
so
that's not true, because
it's very clear. How do we know the variance between the Uthmanic codices are scribal errors? That's the question, and he follows with the answer. So it's not a case of, oh, there are scribal errors in discontinued or manuscripts that we disregard. The claim is what is the origin of some of the variant readings that we have today. So that's why if you look at what his statement is, and the response is in response to that.
Right. This is actually from a textual criticism point of view, right? Disregarding the oral tradition, which is our main mode of transmission of the Quran. Okay, so as mentioned, scribal errors, yes, but how do we know they haven't been incorporated into the variants? Because of the manuscript tradition. The manuscript tradition, right, shows that we can easily tell that there's a scribal error, because when we examine several manuscripts of the same century, we see a consistency amongst the manuscripts, and then we see a mistake here and a mistake there, right? But then it gets corrected. So
that's something different. So I think that, for example, what you're alluding to is the work of Daniel Brubaker, where he identifies, okay, in this manuscript they put Allah and this one didn't. And yes, in some of those cases, but Haitham Siddiqui is talking about the variance in itself, not just sort of comparisons of manuscripts.
Yeah, but the manuscripts would have the variance.
Yes. Right. So those were incorporated. So it wasn't. So your answer was that they corrected it later on. These variants, they've not corrected it later on. And as I was saying about the Harry Potter, because that's why I put the statement from Margin Van Puyen, where he says there are eclectical mixes of different linguistic features thrown together in a very artificial manner.
This is
so what? Yes, but what the argument is, and this is sort of reflected in Haitham Siddiqui's work, is that, and just so the audience understands, so if the Quran, for example, the variant was for a dialect, because we mentioned the Qurayshi dialect in terms of the Uthmanic Codex. So if you had let's say Harry Potter in the English dialect, and every time they refer to trousers as trousers, if we had the same Harry Potter book in the American dialect, it would use pants instead of trousers. So what we would not expect to find is that on page 1, it uses pants, and then on page 2, 3, 4, and 5, it uses trousers, and then it goes back to pants again, because if it was in their dialect, then you're mixing it with a dialect that they don't understand. So through his analysis, through all these so-called Qur'an and different regional texts, there's not enough consistency to highlight that it was revealed in that native dialect. So this is why one of the reasons why they attribute it to scribal errors, because in terms of it's changed the reading of the manuscript.
Okay. So do you know why there's a difference between the ahruf and qira'at?
I'll let you explain.
Okay, so the thing is, the ahruf and the qira'ah, and this is where the misunderstanding is from these little quotes. Okay, now Marian Van
Well,
Putten,
these are scholars who dedicate their, you know, life to.
All right, look. First and foremost, Marian Van Putten is not a scholar on ulum al-Quran. That's not his. That is not his. What do you call it?
So, what is his speciality?
Okay, so look, his speciality is actually linguistics, right? That's his speciality, right? And he's very good in the Arabic language, no doubt about it.
So if he's reading the variants,
however, he is not, what do you call it? Someone who has taken ulum al-Quran as a field, right? He doesn't claim this himself, right? He doesn't claim to have taken ulum al-Quran as a field. All right. So so that's what I'm saying. He's commenting from a linguistic perspective. We have to understand that when Marian Van Putten is commenting on the Quran, he's commenting, and you see it throughout. It's on the linguistic perspective. Yeah, he touches on chains of transmission and the history and stuff, but of course you have to do that even when examining linguistics.
So,
that's his point. And hence, even here,
he mentions
even in this tweet that you've got up, it's talking about the linguistics, right? It's talking about dialects, the Arabic language. He's focusing on the Arabic language, and he's saying, I don't see a consistency in the reading, right? And I feel like it's just been thrown in. Everything's been chucked in. But the qira'at isn't a single, is not a harf. A qira'ah is not a harf. There is a distinction between them. Hence, and that explains why he's thinking this way, right? But that is another topic, right? To explain the difference between the ahruf and the qira'at. So we just need to understand the context in which people are speaking. This is not by any means saying that it is what do you call it, not preserved, right? In fact, nothing in Marian Van Putten's tweet here says that it's not preserved. He's just talking from a linguistic perspective. That it seems like
it would indicate that it's not preserved, because if something has been done artificially, or there are human elements to it, that means that human element would not have been in the original. So therefore, it couldn't have been preserved, because, as you asserted in your original statement, additions and so forth, changes.
But that's the thing. Where are the additions? That's the question I asked you. Where are the additions?
Yeah, so we'll get to that. But in terms of just looking at these statements, so variants that they're saying are scribal errors in terms of their analysis. So obviously I provide, examples sort of as we go along, but just looking at this slide. So this is from their analysis in terms of the conclusions that they're drawing.
No, these are not conclusions. Oh my days. At the end, look, you have to bear in mind, first and foremost, you have highlighted an email and 3 tweets of these individuals, right? You have not presented the conclusion of a thesis, right? Or for example, right? Or anything academic, right? These are things, they are expressing their opinions in the limited character that they have on Twitter. That is not a good place to start with in terms of presenting something from academia. That's the first thing. Secondly, you have to have knowledge on the subject to be able to contextualize these tweets, right? Hence why I mentioned to you, this is referring to, there's a difference between the ahruf and the qira'at. I know where he's coming from, right?
But so what is that difference between the ahruf and the qira'at? Because according to Al-Suyuti, there are basically any scholar you ask will have a different opinion from someone else.
No, that's also not true. Okay.
Well, he gathered the opinions of the scholars. When you go through these books, right, the scholars discuss, right? They highlight discussions that have been made in the past, right? But if you actually look at what the scholars themselves say on the matter, you'll see that there is a general consensus regarding this. Okay. So now do we have a statement in the Quran that tells you what the difference is?
No, because that's not
the purpose of the Quran. Do we have a statement from Prophet Muhammad telling us what the difference is between the two?
No.
Okay, so the opinions that we're going to is speculation.
No.
So if neither of the two sources distinguish what the two were, then anyone else telling us what it is down to speculation.
No, it's down to the evidence of the makeup of the Quran. In the
Okay, so
okay. So
what
first
is
and foremost, right? First and foremost, the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was an illiterate. Okay, so he wouldn't like, and it's got to do with the Arabic language, right?
Yeah, but illiterate
So
doesn't
for
mean
him,
you can be a
no,
master
no,
of a language.
no. Yeah, of course. All right. So this is the thing. All right. Secondly, the Quran of itself is not there to explain its makeup, right? It gives you the challenge, right? We have the history, right? The Quran doesn't tell us the history either. We get this from the Sunnah, okay? So the very concept of the 7 ahruf is from the Sunnah in of itself. We don't get it from the Quran, right? Because it's a historical thing, right? It's not meant to be part of the Quran. What is part of the Quran is the recitation in of itself. It's the 7 ahruf in of itself, not the explanation of the 7 ahruf. However, okay, like I said, this is a subject to go. If I had to sit here and explain to you the discussions, the myth regarding the 39 different explanations of the 7 ahruf and what the consensus is and stuff, like this is something I'm doing behind the scenes, and you already know about this. Right now, this is not the topic, right? But what I'm saying,
for the
what I'm saying to you, it's hard. It's hard to be. It's hard to give this in a brief way when it's such a deep topic, right? And especially to try and contextualize this explanation in the context of a few tweets. So this is what I'm saying to you. No, hold on a second. So all I can say to you now, for the sake of time, and for the sake of the fact that neither you or the majority of the audience actually is aware of ulum al-Quran with regards to the qira'at, it's just going to take too long.
Yeah, so clearly, again, so that's why
so
I asked.
So
Paperboy, if you want to wrap it up, I think we can move on.
Yeah. So all I'm going to say to you is that Yasser Qadi, don't care about him. All right, scribal errors, we acknowledge that. But the readings themselves, we have to understand in the context in which these people are speaking about. Like I said, Marin van Putten is talking from a linguistic perspective. And you have to also bear in mind that he's not religious in of himself. So he's not he's not looking at the Quran through a religious lens. He's looking at it through a historical lens.
Right. So in response, in terms of what I've tried to do is just highlight in terms of what people say in the front and what they were saying behind the scenes. So I'm showing you a contrast in terms of that people are very aware of some of the issues within the traditions regarding the explanation behind the origins of the variants. I've gone to Haitham Siddiqui and Marjin Van Buren because they are two well-known and well-respected scholars in the area, and they've looked at the evidence and they've done work to explain why there are attributes to scribal errors and so forth. Just for the sake of brevity, I just put their summarization in terms of their tweets and whatnot. But clearly there are clear differences in terms of when we look at the manuscript evidence, because there was a reliance on the manuscript evidence, especially we see it within early Islamic literature in terms of when they're comparing the different readings, and they're actually showing you how the spelling is different as well. So these are based on manuscript evidence.
Shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah. So in terms of this one, so I tried to put in some academic sources. So this was Gabriel Reynolds, again Shada Nasser, and with the Gabriel Said Reynolds, he discusses the compilation of the Cairo edition of the Quran. So I'll just read out where he mentions, in the earliest 20th century, therefore the shape of the Quran would have seemed anything but clear. In fact, the Egyptian government was motivated to begin the project that would lead to the Cairo edition due to the variations or errors as an appendix to the Cairo edition describes them. So within the text itself, it describes them as errors. And he says, found in the Quranic text that they had been importing for state schools. So what happened is students were writing their works on using their Qurans. However, there were differences between some of their answers, which causes controversy. So in terms of what was the response, the government destroyed a large number of such texts by sinking them in the Nile River and issued their own texts. The Cairo project followed in the spirit of the Caliph Uthman and the governor Al-Hijjaj, who were reportedly to have destroyed competing versions and distributed their own version of the Quranic text in the 1st century. And then in the second box, it says, however, the Cairo text is often at odds with the manuscript evidence. This is perhaps to be expected, given that the Cairo project was not about recovering a text as much as choosing a text. So here he says there are the methodology they chose to select the final reading wasn't based on any textual evidence. So there are what you would see discrepancies between what we have now and some of the historic manuscripts and so forth.
Okay,
so if you'd like to discuss that before we go.
This is very easy to explain, because the Hafs text was not the most popular, right? So the choice, as he said, it's not to recover a text. The reason the project was not done to recover a text is because there was nothing to recover. We already had the readings. It was a matter of choosing which reading they wanted to print, and they chose the Hafs reading to print. That's all it was. And as mentioned, because people started to mess about with the written copies of the Quran, they did as Uthman radiallahu anhu did. They got rid of them so that nothing gets, nothing that is false is spread, right? That is the point of the preservation, right? To get rid of these writings is to ensure the preservation of the Quran. So they got rid of these things, right? By drowning them, right, in the Nile, as mentioned. Now, the reason being is because this is one of the permissible ways of disposing of the Quran, okay? The two permissible ways is of drowning it, or so that the ink fades away, or by burning it, again, so that the ink fades away. These are the permissible ways in which to dispose of the Quran. So they did that, and they chose to print the Hafs reading. So when they chose the Hafs reading, of course it differed with the readings that they used to have. That's all this is saying.
Well, in terms of when you look at, for example, within the Hafs, there were differences as well. So it wasn't just, for example, differences because of just different qira'at, but actually within some of the Hafs sort of readings as well. So that's where there was this.
There is no evidence to that whatsoever.
Well, if you read the rest of his works, he goes into it. But for the sake of brevity, I've just sort of tried to highlight a small section. But we can go into
There's no evidence for it. But yeah, go on next.
Yeah. So there is evidence, but we'll get to that. But so in terms of the from Shadi Nasser, so his book, The Second Canonization of the Quran. So he talks about. I'll just read out the highlighted. The bit that's highlighted. Al-Tabari objected to many readings which became canonical and divine a few years after his death. Early Muslim scholars did not look at the variant readings of the Quran as divine revelation. They attributed the Quranic readings to human origins, either to the readers Ittihad in interpreting the continental outline of the Quran, or simply to an error in transmission. This position changed drastically in the later period, especially after the 5th or 11th century, where the canonical reading started to be treated as divine revelation, i.e. every single variant reading in the 7 and 10 eponymous readers were revealed by God to Muhammad. So this echoes actually some of the stuff that Yasser Qadhi was mentioning in terms of the human development or the human elements within the Quran. So in terms of going to a scholar, Shadi Nasser, he has extensively looked at Tabari's work, and he makes the claim that Tabari attributed human origins to some of the readings.
Yeah,
So
it's not easy. Another easy point. Before I address it, I just want to address the comment section, because remember, I can see what's going on. I mean, subhanallah, it's been 2 weeks and you guys are still butthurt about ways. And then we have this comment here. Koviv, sorry, but to be associated with soccer films, you need to be part of the insulting that we do to Islam. That's all right, sir. Well, like I mentioned, if you feel like you have the right to do anything you want, don't complain and spend 2 weeks harassing a person, which just makes you look like a joke. If you feel like you have the right to do anything, because then I have the right to do anything. All right. And your stupid emails that you guys keep sending me is just hilarious. So all you do is prove that you are just toxic, and that the people you follow are also toxic. That's all you're doing. That's all you're proving, right? And the thing is, the only reason that we do not insult any part of your religion is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us not to. Because if we let loose, I mean, I said something for 9 seconds, and for 2 weeks you guys were hurting about it. Imagine what would happen if we didn't hold our tongues because of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to. All right? So let's make things very clear. Okay? And these guys ever thought that I would ever give them an apology. All right. Let's continue. All right. Right. So again, this is a very easy point. As I mentioned to you in the last stream, the Muslims didn't know about all the readings. Even today, as you said today, even today, there are many Muslims. Most of Muslims would think that there's only one reading of the Quran. It's no different to back then, right? Back then, people would have learned one reading of the Quran within their regions, okay? And they wouldn't have known about another. So, and it's not just, what do you call it, a Tabari. It goes back to Omar and Hisham. What did Omar do, radiallahu anhu, when he heard Hisham? He was like, no, this is completely wrong. This is a man-made thing that you're reading. It is not taught from the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Grabbed him by his shirt, dragged him to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, no, this is correct. So this happened throughout history, whether by a scholar or by a layman. Okay, if they weren't aware of reading, hold on a second. If they weren't aware of readings, they would have the natural thing would have been attributing it to someone making something up. The reason why it became accepted as divine in the later periods is because it became more widely known. The Qira'at became more widely known, and the scholars were able to prove that they could trace it back to Rasulullah. That's all it is. So this is all that's being documented, is the history.
But that doesn't make sense, because Tabari was aware of many different.
Was he aware of all of them? No.
He was aware. So if he rejected the canonical ones, it would have meant he was aware of the canonical ones. You couldn't reject something you weren't aware of. You would just be unaware of it. So, for example, when he talks about the difference between Maliki,
no. He said which became canonical, right? So
yeah, exactly. So you can't. It says he rejected.
Tabari. Okay.
Sorry, he objected. So he objected to many readings, which means to object to something, you have to be aware of that thing.
Right. Aware of its existence, not necessarily aware of its transmission back to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So
yeah,
if someone
just to clarify, so when he talks about Malik, the example Maliki and Maliki, he's aware of it, but he says one reading is preferred over the other because he is not.
That's a difference. No. There's a difference between preference. There's a difference between preference, right? There are scholars that preferred one reading over another, right? And that's their own personal.
He said you would, if I can't remember which one, but he basically said if you choose one, and his exact words, you're majnun, which means, that's just more than a preference. So
yeah, look, That's fine. These are the opinions of the scholars, right? This is their own personal opinions, right? When they exaggerate like this, all right, if you just pick one, you're crazy. It's to highlight. Hold on, let me explain to you the intentions of these scholars, because at the end of the day, it's all Quran. All of it is Quran. So for you to say I prefer this over this, some of the, like for he would be like, are you crazy to prefer one variant of the speech of Allah to another variant of the speech of Allah? Are you crazy? Like, they should both be equal in your eyes. So these are the sort of statements that they would make, right? You need to understand the mentality and the style of these scholars when they are.
So why would he attribute the Quran, the variants, to human origins?
If he's okay, so if he's made aware of a variant that he has not heard before, then he might attribute it to a human being, because he's like, okay, I'm not aware of this being transmitted back to Rasul, right? This is an explanation, and this is what I explained to you in the previous stream, that some of the scholars or laymen alike, they would not be aware of certain variants and their transmission back to the Prophet ﷺ. So they could attribute it as inauthentic, for example, or man-made.
So if you had chains of narration, just to interject, how would he not know? Because Tabari would you say he was a scholar of the Qira'at?
Tabari, he was not a scholar of the Qur'an, no, but he was aware of them. But that wasn't his field. Tabari is not known for his specialty in Ulum al-Quran. He's known for his tafsir and his tarikh.
Right. So you're saying a scholar who lived within a certain time frame, quite close to the time of the Prophet.
Yeah.
Wasn't aware of the sort of widely transmitted.
Dude, you're talking about someone that was born. I can't remember how many. I think 100 or so years after the death of Rasul. But we talk, like I said to you, Umar radiallahu anhu, who lived at the time of the Prophet was not aware of another reading, which was not aware of the reading of another companion, which is why he grabbed him by the neck and thought he was reciting something man-made and dragged him to the Prophet, peace be upon him. And only then he got clarification that it was correct, that it was divinely revealed. So if we're talking about people at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, while he was still alive, being unaware of different readings, then imagine people who came hundreds of years after. They would also, it's even more likely.
It would be the opposite, because most likely you would be more aware. So when something, just to humor your point, when something is first revealed, you can argue, well, they may not have been aware. But then by the time when you have the canonization, and then you have sort of
this is before here is commenting before Ibn Mujahid. Tabari came before Ibn Mujahid, right?
Yeah, I'm saying, but in terms of, you said 100 years after Muhammad, so there would have been an awareness in terms of
there's a difference.
The chains of narrations of where it came from and so forth.
No, the chains of narration.
The example you gave about
the chains of narration is not the problem, right? It's simply hearing a variant that you are not familiar with. If you hear a variant that you are not familiar with, you're gonna ask questions about it. You're gonna have doubts about it, right? This is simply natural, right? But like I said, as the science, as the years went by, as the centuries went by, right, it became more widely known, right, about the qira'at and the different variants and everything. All of this stuff was getting documented more and more and more. So
but that doesn't seem to add up, because if it was only several years after he died where you get the canonization by Ibn Mujahid, then people, it seems.
Wait. Who says 7 years?
What it says, I think, where does it say? It says about 15 years. Yeah, I think it was it wasn't too long that they lived apart.
Well, Tabari and Ibn Mujahid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't long. It wasn't long, but I don't think as close as 15 years. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but I'm not sure. They were close, but I don't think as close as 15 years.
Okay, so let's say 20, 30 years.
Whatever the time period, yeah.
So you're saying he was ignorant, but then by that time, then because
But
if
Ibn
Ibn
Mujahid
Mujahid,
dedicated himself. Look, again, Ibn Mujahid is known for in ulum al-Quran. That's his field. At-Tabari, that's not his field. So
Right.
again, there's not a like for like here. At-Tabari focused on tafsir and tarikh, right? Now, when you look at At-Tabari's works in his tafsir, you actually do come across the qira'at. He does mention the variants, right? In some of in the verses that he's commenting on, right, where he knows, but there were other variants that he wasn't aware of.
So okay, so to simplify the question, what I'm getting at, so can you provide early Islamic scholars who made the claim that the readings were more attributed to divine revelation as opposed to human intervention or human origins?
Yes, of course we can.
Okay, can you name some?
The Sahaba themselves, man.
Okay, can you provide a statement of what they said?
Okay, not a statement. They read it, right? So if they are reading it, they are reading it as divine revelation. So it doesn't need to be a statement. So when they are reading these variants, that is them believing it's from divine revelation, because they are the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Like I said, everything that we do, everything that we get, all stems back to the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and the Prophet himself sallallahu, right? That is always going to be our basis. So whenever you want to ask for evidence regarding whether the variants are from Allah or not, that's where I'm going to go to, right? As someone sitting here today. But when we back project to people that didn't have,
well, you would have to, there's a problem with that, because you would have to prove that they were aware of those different variants, because as you've said, some people were not aware of certain things. So we have to, and this is some of the works of so everything would have developed. For example, you wouldn't be able to prove anything pre-Uthmanic codex.
No, we can't.
So
that's where our transmission.
Okay, guys. Brother Yemeni, 1 minute just to respond, and then we move forward, please.
Right. Okay. I don't need that long. I kept like the example I always give you, right, in this session. Ibn Mas'ud, his reading, we still have, even though it's pre-Uthmanic, right? He still had his codex. He was teaching his readings to the people prior to the codices of Uthman, and that tradition continued. So, hence why we have the reading of Abu Amr, which is one of the 10 that we recite today. So this in of itself is evidence that we know it's from divine origin, because we still have the chain of transmission going all the way back. That is our primary mode of transmission. That's what we are saying. Dive, inshallah. Let's move on.
Okay, let's move forward, Paperboy. I'm just thinking about the time. We've nearly hitting the 2-hour mark.
Oh, wow.
I think if we don't mind speeding it up a bit,
okay,
and then maybe we can do another part 5 in a conclusion, if that's okay.
How many slides we got left?
Let me see.
He's tapping quite a lot. I'm assuming there's quite a few left.
It's about 15. However,
Ooh.
Some of them can be condensed because we could combine some of the slides, so we wouldn't necessarily.
I actually feel, Brother Yemeni, this particular preservation of the Quran is done and dusted. I think, alhamdulillah, I think it's been answered. I think if there's another topic,
well,
then we move on to that.
Yeah, this slide is very easy, because I've already covered it by saying that it's got to do with the Arabic language, right? So it is one of the ways that people could tell whether something was correct or incorrect, okay? But the thing is here, there's another problem here. This narration was narrated by Dhahhak. Dhahhak is known to be weak. So that's the issue you have here. So this statement doesn't really hold much weight, because it is a weak narration.
Okay,
And
so
Ad-Dhahhak
actually,
and Ad-Dhahhak never met Ibn Abbas. This is the problem.
so that's fine. If we, I just got one more slide in terms of the
Yeah, go on. Let's go to that slide. Let's go
if
to
you
that
go
slide.
to the other slide, so this is okay. So in terms of the and we spoke about the variants within even the tradition. So if we go to Dahabi, there's a quote, and it says, Hafs was reliable in his reading, consistent and accurate, but not so in the transmission of the tradition. Hafs himself said that he did not depart from Asim's reading except for one word in Surat al-Rum. So Hafs, if you look at your Quran today, Hafs reads the word as Darfin, Duafin, in God who is whom shaped yourself out, whereas Asim read it as Darfin. So if we look at the verse, even according to grammatical rules, it should be read as Darfin. So we don't see that in the current sort of this is for what we see in Asims. We don't.
Let him finish, Brother Yemeni. Let him finish, and then
obviously I'm not a master in Arabic, so forgive me if I'm butchering things. So they disagree. So he said his recitation or his Quran, whatever you want to call it, differed from Asim's, his teachers, by one word. So Duafin and Darfin. So we see in the Hafs tradition that it has the Duafin. You can correct me if I'm saying it wrong. Reason why it should be the Darfin is because the Skun prior, so in terms of Arabic linguistics, it would make more sense to be read as Darfin. So we see something that was changed, that was with it, that is now in the current readings today.
Okay.
Okay. Brother Yemeni, if you don't mind, I really want you to respond in a way where
that's fine. No problem.
There won't be any back and forth, so we can.
Okay, no problem. That's fine. I said to you, give me a Hafs reading and a Hafs reading that are different. That's what I said to you. You can't do that. There's a difference between a reading from Hafs and his teacher. That's a different thing altogether. Okay.
So
again,
just to incorporate your reader. I know I'm interjecting, but it's just the point was where the statement of human intervention. So if we're going to account for the differences, we have to you have to demonstrate where this difference and why this difference is.
It's a choice of the reading, right? That's all it is. Now, da'f and da'f, right? There isn't a grammatical issue here, right? And you haven't actually provided a grammatical issue. You just said one is better, but you know, or one is what was the wording that you used?
I said it should be da'f because the word before it ends with a skun.
Okay. Which word ends with sukun?
Let me just consult my notes.
Because the ayah here.
Yeah.
Allahu alladhi khalaqakum min da'fin. No, that's fine. There's no grammatical issue here.
So so for the audience to understand, in terms of if you read it Darfin or Dolphin, is there a difference? Does it create a difference?
No, not really.
So there's no, in terms of grammatical reading.
No, there isn't an issue there. There's no grammatical error here.
So what is Dolphin and the difference between Darfin and Dolphin?
No, it's the same thing. It's just a way of saying it.
Okay, so if Hafs was the student of Asim, that means the teacher would teach you his reading. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
So if your teacher has taught you Darfin, where would Hafs have got Dolphin?
Because he would have known it from. It wasn't just the readings were. They didn't just understand the readings from their own teachers. They did hear the readings from others.
Because here's the issue: if you say they're the chains of narration, so this is the person, this was the chain. So Hafs goes to Asim, goes to whoever goes back. If you're saying he's taken even one letter or one word from somewhere else,
it's
then
not a word.
his chain.
It's the same word. There's a haraka it's a haraka.
Right.
That's
So why is there different? And that's what I'm saying. So where if your teacher teaches you Darfin, and in yours you read Dolphin, where is that difference coming from?
this is taught by Rasul. These are all of this is
So,
taught by.
but then
Rasul.
wouldn't have Asim taught that to Hafs?
He would have been aware of it, right?
But-
Asim would have been aware of it, but because of Asim's personal preference of his of reading, because you can't read them all at the same time, but you can
so
teach
then that
them.
would make the chain. Now,
No, okay. So
if-
let me
if
give you
you
an example. Let me
Okay,
give you an
so-
example. In Somalia, the Somalians are known for producing hafad that memorize all 10 qira'at, okay? But none of these qurra, right, would ever recite all of them, right, all 10. They would pick one and run with it, but they would still know the other qira'at.
Right.
In
But
the
I'm saying
same
he
way,
taught Hafs Darfin,
it would have been awesome.
but it doesn't say that. He says he did not depart from
No, no.
Hafs's reading except in one word.
Okay, but it doesn't say that Asim didn't know the other reading, right? Like
But
you said,
again, you're speculating. We're looking for
it's
evidence.
who else are you going to learn it from? This is not speculation.
Well, this is why people make the claim of when you look at within the traditions, there seems to
A
be
human intervention
preferences and intervention in some
No,
of the readings.
human intervention, right?
Mhm.
In terms of preservation or a lack of preservation, is if you start changing what was originally revealed, inserting
Right.
what was not originally revealed. This is not what happened. Having a preference is not changing the original.
So
Because
can you
it's a
show
multiple
me
text.
where an original reading read
Right,
as
so
Darfin?
hold on a second. So, for example, right, you can actually find it in that catalog that you showed, right? You'll find it there. This would be a shared reading, something that's no longer read, but it's documented because we know where it came from. Now, the thing is like, for example, I was raised reading Hafs, like the majority of the world, right? But I still know about the other qira'at. I still know about the other variants. So if I became a hafid and I had a student, I could teach him both, right? And then he can go off and teach someone else. And the reading can change between me and my student. So I could be teaching my student Hafs because that's my preferred reading. But because I teach him the other readings, he could go off and teach someone else a Duri, for example, or the riwayah of Ibn Kathir.
But the problem is you haven't shown where he got that reading from. You're speculating on, okay, we have different qira'at, it must be shad.
This is
But
not.
if the tradition is that your teacher is teaching you one of the readings in a particular way, you're then carrying that reading forward.
No, this is
even if a teacher taught a different multiple recitation, you wouldn't say your reading differed from your teachers, because you would say he taught me this reading and there was a difference in one word.
I just gave you the example of how it could differ, right?
But you've not given me evidence of how it did differ.
It's a living tradition. I have, because it's a living tradition. You can demonstrate that today with the kids in Somalia.
That again, you're jumping forward. We're looking at that specific time, because now, yes,
it's not
with
changed.
The standardization, people memorize it, but
the tradition has not changed. The tradition has not changed
because you've not provided sufficient. You just said, well, people today have different readings, but it seems odd that his reading differed by one word, and we should then be able to find that one word in evidence previously. I know you're not privy to this information, but the problem is, if we look, we won't. And I'm happy for you to challenge me at a later date.
Okay, brother Yemeni, please
anyway,
respond,
look,
and then we'll move on.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you call it? Look at this. Let me just quickly do this. Yemeni, you're making assumptions. What Paperboy has brought up is a big problem for you. If it was a big problem for me, I wouldn't have the answers on hand. What do you call it? But as mentioned, the reason why I'm showing you an example of today is because it's a living tradition. It hasn't changed. In the same way as the Cairo project, using the same tradition of Uthman, radiallahu anhu. The traditions of the Muslims with regards to the Quran has not changed in 1400 years. So me using something today is not back projecting to back then. It is exactly the same as back then, right?
Well, you'd have to provide the evidence. You're making assertions that it
I'm
is.
not making. Okay, I'm
let's
not making.
Yemeni finish. Yemeni finish. Otherwise,
It's-
it'll be back and forth, and then it would just
All right.
never end. And sorry, Paperboy, but otherwise it'd just go on. So, Brother Yemeni, finish off without making any more statements, so Paperboy can respond. Just respond to what Paperboy has brought up, if you don't.
Well,
mind.
I feel like I'm just going in circles because I've explained it, and he's trying to make it seem like I have, I'm making assumptions, but nothing that I've said is actually an assumption. Asim would have been aware of different readings. If you go back in the chain, he would have learned from teachers who also knew different readings. Okay, so he would have been aware of different readings. Going back to the Prophet ﷺ, in terms of the ahruf. Now we are looking at a time, okay, where we have the shift from ahruf to qira'at, okay, and this is the period which Paperboy does not understand and isn't accounting for. I'm speaking from a position of background knowledge on ulum al-Quran, whereas you are not. So you are only presenting things that you have found without actually understanding the underlying context, which is why you've had to ask me several questions about what does this mean, what does that mean, because you yourself don't actually have the background knowledge on it. So for you to come to me and say that I'm the one speculating, actually you're the one that's speculating because you don't have the background knowledge to understand where I'm coming from.
Okay, brother Yemeni, that's fine. I'll tell you what we're going to do now, because we've gone over the 2 hour
Do I
mark.
get a response to that? A 1 minute.
I want to give you the thing is it was your claim, and I want Brother Yemeni to finish off with a rebuttal. Otherwise, you'll make a claim, and then I know Yemeni will be biting his fingernails, waiting to respond. So I don't want to just go back and forth. You could say it towards the end when we have if you want to write it down, note it down, and towards the end you can recap on this particular topic, if that's okay, Paperboy. And of course, I'm sure we're going to have a part 5 to this, and possibly 6 and 7. So, looking forward to that. So if you want to remove this slide, and Brother Yemeni, I don't know if you want to put the link in the chat and start getting some guests on.
Well, Paperboy, do you want to go for Q&A now, or do you want to?
Yeah, because this one, after this, it goes to another topic, so we can do the next topic next.
What's the next slide? Just quickly, I just want to have a quick look at it. Oh, where is
you need
it?
to go back to the other one. So the next slide is.
The next one is.
This one.
Okay, yeah.
We can leave that for the next one, if that's okay.
Just claim 11. Okay, no problem. Let me put this in the chat.
Of course, brothers and sisters, I don't know if you've been watching, Brother Yemeni has been playing chess, and I'm sure he'll be doing another show where he'll invite any chess players to come on and challenge him at playing chess. And I've got to warn you guys, he is pretty good. So look out for Brother Yemeni. He's a bit of a, as they say, a bit of a dark horse. He is he's pretty good. So hopefully, inshallah, when's your next chess stream?
I've actually already set up.
Before we go to the chat, should we do a summary of sort of just what we've covered today each?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, sure. Do you want to remove this slide and then?
Fine. Yeah.
I'm assuming maybe 2 minutes each. Is that okay? Because I'm just thinking about the time.
Yeah, that's fine. So you can stop sharing this slide.
Yeah, it's just my screen went blank again for some reason. We've got to give it a second. Let everything come back. The hell? Can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yeah, we can hear you, but the slide is still on the screen, Brother Yemeni.
Yeah, it's just because my like I said, my laptop's gone blank. It's getting very old. I need to get a new one, but yeah.
Shall we begin? And we'll let Brother Paperboy, why his memory's still fresh from the last slide, to maybe
let
start
him
this
crack
2
on.
minutes.
Let him crack on,
Yeah.
and then.
Okay, Brother Paperboy, as soon as you start speaking, your timer will start.
Okay, so actually, to be honest, I forgot what I was going to respond to in the last one. But in terms of what we've discussed today, we looked at the preservation of the Quran. So we clearly see Al-Yemeni's definition of perfect preservation clearly differing from what most people would consider as perfect preservation. So I highlighted where there were deletions in terms of verses that we have no more in the Quran, such as the verse of 5 sucklings that was in the original. We found a haphazardous explanation of how we got to the Uthmanic recension of the Quran. When we look at scholarly level opinions, people who have studied this, Al-Yemeni's response is, well, they don't know what they're talking about. This is not their field of expertise. So, but these are people who do spend time researching, and I've just provided a summary of what they've said. So clearly their conclusions, as highlighted by Yasir Qadhi, is there are human or artificial elements to the compilation and the variants within the Quranic tradition. So in terms of Al-Yemeni's questions that he had to me, I tried to provide evidence to rebut his claim. So he asked for a verse that was being read before Muhammad that had been deleted. So I gave one. Also, in terms of, he asked within the Hafs, I didn't have an example, but I showed you where Hafs differed from Asim. And I asked, well, if you have chains of narration, that means the teacher is teaching the student his recitation. So if there are differences, where is that difference come from? And where is the chain for that variant within your reading? It must
10
go
seconds.
So we see a very haphazardous approach. We saw little evidence, and we clearly see that the Quran was not perfectly preserved, as stated by the Quran as an evidence that it was from God.
Perfect timing. Spot on. Yemeni, 2 minutes to you. As soon as you start talking, I'll start the clock.
I'm not going to say anything now, so you don't start the time. Okay, so let's just not forget the point of the whole preservation thing. It is to because the claim that I made is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised that he will preserve the Quran, hence this topic. So it's not a side topic. The evidence that Paperboy was asking for was the evidence that he provided for us that the Quran was preserved. He says that things were missing. I asked him to provide something that was deleted from the Quran after the death of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was unable to do that. In fact, he provided 5 ahadith, which all displayed abrogation happening within the lifetime of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. With regards to the readings, with regards to the topic of the Qira'at, unfortunately, Paperboy doesn't have a grasp of the topic in of itself. I think by his own admission, in a way in which he can utilize certain statements in the context of which they are being said, so which produces a problem. Now, the aspect of perfect preservation, as I mentioned, we're not changing the definition. We're talking about what we had originally, and what we had originally still remains with us today. The aspect of human intervention, there's a difference between choice and corruption. Choosing a reading of a inherently multiform text and inherently multiform recital is different to corrupting the text. Now, there was no evidence of corruption of the text presented by Paperboy, none whatsoever. If anything, he just proved that there was a choice that Hafs chose to read a single variant different to his teacher. And we know that
10,
throughout
10 seconds.
Yeah, and we know that in the early days of Islam, the Sahaba who transmitted the Quran, they were aware of multiple variants, hence how we have the transmission, and hence how we have the Masahif of Uthman radiallahu anhu. So nothing that he thought he presented was actually presented.
Awesome. Nah, that's been a really good summary of how everything has played out today so far. Brothers and sisters, this is an opportunity for you to come on and ask questions. Questions have to be related to today's stream. I did put it out in the private chat, but if Brother Yemeni wants to overrule me, feel free to do so. But really, while everything is fresh today, I really would like all questions to be based on today's stream. And of course, the rules are quite simple. Please have your camera on backstage and give us a wave. And then if you wish to turn it off, your camera backstage, you can do so. And then you'll be brought up to the main screen. But guys, whoever's going to ask a question, please introduce yourself briefly, put your question forward, and please stay silent until the question is answered. You may not like the answer, but you still have to accept it. And inshallah ta'ala, if there's opportunity for you to come back again and ask a following question, you'll be able to do so. So Brother Yemeni, please, if there's anybody backstage, we can get them on.
No problem. Paperboy, if you just remove your slides from the back chat, just to give room for people. Striving Muslim has already verified himself, so we'll bring him on, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, akhi.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you.
Striving Muslim, first of all, welcome to the show. I'm just thinking about the time. Please introduce yourself and then put your question forward.
Okay, so my name is, I go with Striving Muslim as my online alias. I'm a Muslim. I've been a Muslim all my life, and I'm from Nigeria.
Welcome,
mostly
brother.
my
Welcome
question is, thank you. So
sorry.
I stumbled upon.
Apologies. Brother Muhammad, can you just post the link on your...
I'm just going to look for it now, and bear with me. I've got it. Yeah, thank you.
Taib, inshallah. So apologies, Striving Muslim. Oh, what's your name, akhi?
Abdul Hamid.
Abdul Hamid.
Yes.
Apologies, Abdul Hamid.
No problem. So I stumbled upon the discussion. So I've watched the previous 4 episodes over the past 1 week. But given that the format is we have to ask questions about today's topic, so I'll just ask you this question, Paperboy. By the way, thank you again. I echo every Muslim's sentiments about the way you've conducted yourself over the whole conversation. My question is, have you actually studied as someone who has done the research about this topic, have you studied the concept of the 7 harufs that the Quran was revealed in? Have you studied that concept on its own before you go into the issue of preservation?
Good question, Striving Muslim. You got the question, Brother Paperboy? You're muted right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so in terms of the length of my study, it will just be looking around the Western scholarship on it. So people like Shady Nasser reading their books about the canonization, and also people like Margin Van Puyen and Haitham Sidki. So as there are, a lot of Arabic texts I wouldn't be privy to, but for me, the highest standard of academics is Western scholarship because they're very objective in their assessment. So I'm not an expert. I would still consider myself a layman, but I rely on the opinions of the Western scholars.
Just have a look at this.
Brother Yemeni, do you want to respond to that?
Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Paperboy is being honest in his in saying that he's learning from secondary sources and he's not privy to the primary sources. But this is why it's very important to be able to have access to the primary sources. And this is like, even though people say, oh, why do you keep shaming Christians for not learning Arabic? Well, the reason is because you decide to speak on topics on the Arabic language and then do nothing to learn the language. Whereas I see when Muslims start to speak about the original texts of the Bible, they would actually be trying to study at least the portions of Greek and Hebrew that they need in order to understand those passages. So I would expect the same from Christians. However, like I said, this comment here, Haitham Sidki was on Blog and Theology with Brother Paul, and he actually mentioned that all manuscripts to actually check out, i.e. that there isn't an issue. So what are we actually talking about? And I think this is, like I said, Paperboy is drawing conclusions from secondary sources, not having the understanding of the background from the primary sources. That's where I think the issue is lying.
Okay. Thank you for that, Brother Yemeni. I just want to, I'm thinking, I know, Paperboy, I know you want to respond, but we have to move on to the next questioner. If there's one backstage driving Muslim, thank you. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to Brother Yemeni's channel and check out his chess stream. If you play chess, look out for that next stream. But Jazakumullah khairan, brother. May Allah protect and preserve you and your family. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
All right, we'll bring Brother Faisal on, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, brothers doing? How are you doing, Paperboy?
Good, thanks. Nice to see you again.
Nice seeing you as well. Yes, so I just want to bring up something because I know this is sort of when Christians and Muslims are discussing this, a number of times this is brought up that the Western academics are neutral. They don't have a bone to pick with either side, and that this is all, they're being very objective. I don't agree with that presupposition. Firstly, because all of them are presupposing naturalism. They're not looking for all of the information that is available and making a judgment using all of the evidence that is there. So would you ever consider someone who denies the existence of God and comes to you and says, this Bible is just some stardust and it has no meaning, or you are a stardust, you don't have any meaning, and basically they're making a conclusion based on half the knowledge that is out there, only the knowledge that you can actually get from the world around you, and ignore the existence of God.
So is your question basically how come Paperboy is taking information or knowledge from...
I'm basically questioning, why do you take them as objective when they clearly deny the existence of God, and they basically disregard a whole lot of other metaphysical evidence that could be put forth for either the Bible or the Quran?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there's two aspects. So you do, in Western scholarship, what is good about West? So actually, let me just start with in terms of scholars, for example, people appeal to Bar Ehrman. He's not a Christian, but he is seen as one of the leading textual critics of Christianity. So people can rely on his opinion. There's things I disagree with on a theological level. However, with Western scholarship, it's supposed to be based on factual evidence, what we can prove. So for me, I accept that as a minimum requirement. Are there evidences that are outside which I would feel go against what they say? Yes, I'll give you an example. In terms of the dating of the Gospels, they date them to post 70 AD. The reason why they do that is because they say Jesus couldn't have predicted the destruction of the temple before it happened. So this is a metaphysical claim, so they have to date all the Gospels after 70 AD. As a Christian, I believe in prophecies, and I believe that if that's the only reason why they are dating the Gospels post 70 AD, we see Jesus, they should be dated actually earlier. So I hold a position of the Gospels were written earlier, but from an academic perspective, in terms of what we can prove, I will accept the factual evidence, even though I disagree with the metaphysical claims. So that's why, in terms of the analysis, even with the Quran, I will accept the evidence of Western scholars, because they are just looking at the bare minimum of what we can prove factually. Yes, there may be metaphysical explanations, but that goes too much into theology and beliefs, and then that's where you get resistance. So that's why I rely on academic. Western academics.
One second, Brother Faisal, I would really want Brother Yemeni to maybe add something, or if he wants to respond to that question also.
Well, I've already touched on this, which is why I mentioned, even when he was talking about Marine Van Putten and his comments on the selection of the variants and how they seem to be artificially jumbled up. I was saying he's speaking from the perspective of a linguist, not speaking from a historical perspective. At the end of the day, he is a professor of linguistics. He is not a scholar in the realm of Qur'an. So we have to understand under which paradigm and which field, which perspective these people are making their comments on. So we can't say that because you're making a comment on the Qur'an, that means you are in a position of authority, or that you are speaking from the perspective of the science of the Qur'an and of itself. And like you said, there are biases. Like you said, Faisal, there are biases. Whereas the Muslims, when we document our history, you see that there isn't actually a bias. We document where there are disagreements, where there are fabrications. We document all of this, which is why the preservation of the Quran is so certain for us. I mean, Paperboy did all the work for us, really, over here, and displayed to us how much we hold on to the Quran, to the point that we catalog the shared readings, the ones that are no longer read and the ones that are fabricated. To
Last 10 seconds.
To ensure that what we have is authentic and is original.
Okay, fantastic. Brothers and sisters, due to the time situation, if there's any Christians backstage, and I think there is, feel free to jump on and ask the question. Faisal, Jazakumullah khair for asking the question. Very good question. Inshallah, see you on the next stream, inshallah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And just a very quick word, Paperboy, you're welcome we keep doing these comparison videos on Bible and the Quran. You're welcome on the channel as well, our channel as well, whenever you want to. And because you're very knowledgeable and you're very like we've talked about before, the way you've conducted yourself is amazing. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Really
Really good question.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, due to the time restraints, we have to really balance this out now. So if there's any
there is one. There's
please
one
jump on.
Jacob, are you okay with your camera staying on? Just give me a thumbs up if you're okay, or if you yeah. All right. Jacob, welcome to the stream. How you doing?
Welcome, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm a Christian.
Yeah, fantastic. Introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Yeah, so I'm a Christian. My question is for Yemeni. If the Quran is perfectly preserved, I'll just go back to the interview that Mohammed Hijab had with Yasser Qadi.
Yeah.
If he was so confident that the Quran was perfectly preserved, why couldn't he just answer the question, which Quran would he write on the blank piece of paper?
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Confident.
Yeah, that's not a problem. The thing is, that interview caused a massive stir up in the Muslim community, because we knew that it was a mistake on the part of Mohammed Hijab to interview someone who's not an authority on the subject. This was a criticism that came from that interview, and we maintained our position. Right now, Yasser Qadi is not an authority. However, it put us in a position where we had to start addressing the topic of the qira'at, and this we have been doing since thing. Now, if you ask me which what I would write down as the Quran, I would say any of the readings.
So, okay. I mean,
okay.
Since
the fact that you're the only Christian and probably the last questioner, I will let you ask a follow-on question to be quite fair, because we have two previous Muslims, and you can ask another question or you can follow up with your question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, like my follow-up question would be probably not related to my first question. Sorry, I just wanted to ask another question. Before when what's her name? The Christian lady
Actually,
from.
before you ask your second question, can I just respond to the first one and then you ask your second one and then?
Oh, good point, Paperboy. Thank you for reminding me. I appreciate that. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I would say in answer to that, and hopefully that was demonstrated within the presentation today, is that where there are holes in terms of the narrative, excuse the pun, but Al-Yemeni said, well, this must be the case. He wasn't able to provide any actual evidence. And in academics, you have to provide evidence for your claim. So that's why I appealed to, for example, the writings of, the Gospels. I believe they predate it, but that's not evidence in itself. So that's why scholars would say, well, they're written post AD. So what we see is a lot of assertions into what they think would have happened, but they provide little evidence. So if, for example, the verse of 5 sucklings, do we have any like mutawatir hadiths where they are confirming that this happened? No, his response will be, well, this must be the case because we didn't see it in their Quran. So from an objective perspective, you cannot say what was in the original Quran because there are things that are later developments. The answer would be, well, we have a chain of narration, so therefore it must go back to the Prophet, and therefore it was in the original Quran. But objectively, you cannot piece those gaps together. And just the last point, when I mentioned the Battle of Yamama, it was compiled, but then Uthman compiled it again. So, but then what you wouldn't have needed that process if Muhammad had perfected the religion and set everything in front of everyone and everyone knew, but then we see the disagreements and whatnot. So this is why that statement came to hold standard narrative.
Sure. We are gonna. I know, Brother Yemeni, I understand, but we have to give Jacob another opportunity
Of course,
to ask a question. So Jacob, go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you for that. My next question is, why did Uthman burn the other Quran if there's only one Quran? Why did he burn the other, what do you call it, manuscripts or other readings of the Quran if it's just the one Quran?
Yeah, sure. So the one Quran, it's not about what, because it's just one Quran. That's not the reason, right? The reason is because the people who had their personal copies, they would scribe other things into them. So you had some of the Sahaba that would scribe a hadith, right? Hadith into their margins. Or, for example, in the case of Ibn Mas'ud, we hear this thing that has been popularized by Christian apologists, that he had 116 chapters in his Quran, when it's actually not. It's actually 114 chapters, right? And 2 qunut, which are 2 prayers which we recite during prayer. But the Christians thought it was actually 2 additional chapters of the Quran. So hence that same confusion that the Christian apologists have today is the same reason that Uthman radiallahu anhu burnt the other copies, so that people don't make that mistake and don't assume that things that are written in someone's codex or personal copy is then later thought to be part of the Quran. That's the reason.
Okay, Paperboy, you'll have a minute to respond because I'm thinking about the time aspect. So you've got a minute to respond. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think this is a very good question you've highlighted, and this is where a lot of the Islamic problems stem from Uthman's intervention. The reason why it's problematic is we see, for example, Ibn Mas'ud is one of the people we were told that the Muslims are told to learn the Quran from. There was fights with him and Zayn ibn Talib, and what was in his codex was burnt as well by Uthman. Now, it wasn't done by Muhammad, so what gave Uthman the authority to burn what was in his codex and some of the recitations? That's why they're not in the current canonical verses that we have today, and most Muslims wouldn't be aware of those verses if you recited it to them. So that's a very big problem, that Uthman did something that Muhammad himself had not authorized.
You had 5 seconds left. Thank you, Paperboy. Jacob, thank you for joining us. I think you'll be the
Thanks
last
for the questions.
questioner. Feel
Thank
free to join us next time. I think next time will be next week, inshallah, God willing, on a Monday or a Tuesday. So stay tuned for part 5. Probably be up to part 7. I'm really looking forward to it. But nevertheless, thank you for your questions. Thank you for your questions. Yeah.
Also, thank you for
soon.
having me. Thank you,
Thanks.
Paperboy. Thank you for.
You're welcome.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Sorry, brothers and sisters, we have to really have no more questioners, and hopefully you can join us next time. If you want to do maybe a minute each quickly, just to wrap it up, but no more topics. Just whatever you spoke about today, stick on them. Otherwise, everybody would be biting their fingernails and stuff. So, Paperboy, you want to go ahead? Do you want to go first? Because I know you've got to go. So, if you want to go first, you can have a minute starting from as soon as you start speaking.
Yeah, I just want to thank you both for the moderation and Yemi for the debates. I hope the audience finds it, educational. We've had a good back and forth. And, obviously the purpose of this is just to sort of present our arguments. People may disagree or not agree or disagree, but for the audience to decide. And I've tried to at least bring evidence to support what I've saying. And just to summarize, as I said, we clearly see, for example, Muslims will say, if you say to a 5-year-old child, describe God, they would not describe a Trinity. It's counterintuitive. In the same way, if I went to that same 5-year-old child and said, describe perfect preservation, they're not going to come out with aruf, qira'at, and all of these sort of things that we see within Islamic literature. So, if the perfect preservation is supposed to be a sign from God to people, it's not the greatest sign to people because it's too confusing. It's too convoluted. One text that's preserved, no changes. That's what people would see and accept as perfect preservation. But we see too much,
10 seconds.
Too much just errors, or you're looking for the right words. But even when scholars analyze it, they don't come to the same conclusion of perfect preservation themselves.
Thank you, Paperboy. Thank you for summarizing that. Appreciate that. Brother Yemeni, as soon as you start speaking, I'll start the clock. So you've got a minute.
No problem. Well, as regards to authorization, the Prophet ﷺ did give the authorization to, as he mentioned, to the Muslims, follow the 4 rightly guided Khalifa. So that's what happened. So there was the authorization. With regards to this analogy that he just brought, it just doesn't work, because that's got nothing. If you explain to a child, if you ask a child, what does preservation mean, they'll say, having what is original, and that's what the Qur'an is. The Qur'an is the original. What we have today is the original. The ahruf and the qira'at, that's a different aspect to it. But in terms of what's original, we have this. And as mentioned, the evidences that Paperboy says I haven't presented is because he presented them for us.
10 seconds.
And displayed everything that I've already previously mentioned. So with that, أقول قولي هذا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Brother Yemeni. Guys, I know it's very frustrating in the chat, but it's very difficult also to be a host and a moderator. So I'm trying to balance everything, and inshallah, hopefully I've done a good task and a good role. But we have displayed to the world that we can have a discussion without any insults and any negative behaviors. And it's been really amazing how these two gentlemen have really, for the last 4 shows now, have discussed the topics of the Qur'an and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and much, much more, and had a nice civilized discussion. So we got to keep it moving in that direction. And with a big shout out to all the moderators for your help. I really appreciate it. And guys, don't forget to join us for the next one. Hopefully it'll be next week. And also don't forget about Yemeni's chess competition. Brother Yemeni, if you want to put the link,
yeah,
go ahead, brother.
So let me just. I did say I was going to put this on the channel, but inshallah I will. Just before I do this, I think Paperboy is a good example of how guilt by association doesn't always work. It's not always the rule.
No,
you know?
Brother Yemi, I know it's your show, but I really do want to go there. Okay, because Paperboy might want to reply, and then it'd be a back and forth, and we'd definitely be a part five.
No. I'm just making it clear that despite his association with Soko in the park and online, I just want people to be very clear with the people that he is an exception to the rule, and he's displayed that. It's proven in his own character and his own intellect and academic ability. So that's all I want to say. But moving on to the chess. Let's share my screen quickly. Obviously, we've started this on chess.com. If you do have an account or want to be part of it, we go to socials, clubs, and I started my own. What is going on? Oh no, it's because I haven't logged in. That's why. Let me log in. Right. Okay. Socials, clubs, and then we have our own Rihatul Arab, 14 members at the moment, and I've already set up the arena, the chess arena, which is going to be on the 21st of July. It's a Sunday at 8. I don't know why it says 8:14, but it's at 8:15. So, but we stream at 8 o'clock, and then anyone can join in at any time. We will run for 2 hours, 10-minute games, and we will have, and we'll see who wins the most games at the end of the 2 hours, and you get paired up based on your rating. So, if you do want to play chess, and you have a chess.com account, then find Rihatul Arab. I'll put this in the chat now. Check this out: Paperboy versus Yemeni on chess.com. Do you play?
Unfortunately, I don't. I used to when I was younger, but you would probably beat me comprehensively.
Well, I started picking it up again during COVID, so that's the only reason I got back into it. But like you, I used to play it when I was a kid, then I stopped. But yeah, so that's join that, and then on Sunday the 21st we'll do this, and I have a special announcement to make at the end of that tournament. So if you do participate, then you will be privy to that, and if you're not, you're going to regret it. So but it's going to be good fun. Inshallah, it will be an improvement of what we had in our first chess session. So yeah, just join up and let's have a good time playing chess and being battling each other on the board.
Alhamdulillah, fantastic. There's so many people in the chat responding to that. So guys, yeah, like you said, hit the link, you'll get onto the club, the chess club. The link is there. Brother Yemeni has posted it, so please check it out, and I'm looking forward to watching it from afar. I find chess quite interesting. I'm a bit of a checkers player myself, and I would say I'm pretty good at checkers. But yeah, thank you once again, brothers and sisters, for joining us. Been a fantastic show. This is Brother Muhammad from Cover Fef, and Brother Yemeni and Brother Paperboy have been having a nice discussion, and inshallah ta'ala looking forward to part 5. So final words from me is the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان